Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday the 9th of June. Coming up this morning.
Rishi Sunak signs the Atlantic Declaration with Joe Biden, hailing it the indispensable alliance as countries begin to close ranks on China.
But it wasn't all serious business as the US president gave Mr Sunak the wrong title.
Well, Mr. President, I just demoted you. Mr. Prime Minister, it's great to have you back.
And meanwhile, former US President Donald Trump has been charged with 7 counts, including willfully retaining national defense secrets. But not a man to willingly take something lying down. Here's what Trump had to say.
I'm an innocent man, I'm an innocent person. They had the Mueller hoax, the Mueller report, and that came out, no collusion after 2.5 years. That was set up by Hillary Clinton and Democrats. But this is what they do. This is what they do so well.
The knifeman who stabbed a group of children at a playground yesterday in Annecy, southeastern France, has been denied asylum just days before the attack. That's according to the French Interior Minister. 4 children, including one 3-year-old British girl, remain in hospital in a stable condition.
And as always, we'll bring the latest weather update.
A subtle change in wind direction will bring dramatic changes to our weather. Increased heat, increased humidity, but the chance for some of thunderstorms. Find out more in the GB News forecast coming up soon.
Yeah, top morning and a happy Friday to you. I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. So we've got a great story for you in the Daily Mail this morning. It's our favourite things as British people, apparently. These are things that bring us happiness in life. They've done a poll of the top 20 things. Can you imagine what the top 20 things are? What would be your number one? Oh, a cup of tea.
Yeah, cheers.
Nice cup of tea.
Nice
Yeah,
morning
that's
brew.
a simple. Let me see if that comes up on the list, actually. I'm sure it does. Number 13, actually.
13? I thought it'd be higher than that.
Yeah, first sip of tea in the morning is number 13. Number 1 is actually a random act of kindness. That's what makes us happy.
An old-fashioned treat, you know,
Yes.
kind of looking for kinship amongst us. I like that, a little chat at a bus stop or someone holding a door for you.
Yes.
A lot of people think that's sexist now. I think it's an old-fashioned treat.
No, I think that's lovely. People wanting to help you out. Slipping into freshly laundered sheets is number 2. Receiving an unexpected gift is number 3. Number 4 is packing for a sunny holiday. There is a lovely feeling of packing.
Yeah, there is. And the fresh sheets thing, I really get, especially when we do these really crippling early starts. Don't know about you, but like a nice crisp pillow, nice crisp sheet, straight into them.
Yeah,
and you feel like, you know, refreshed. It's great to see that small things can make a big difference.
Do you know what? We're very easily pleased, it seems. I mean, I was about to say what makes me happy is after these early shifts is to go have a nap. And do you know what? A nap is number 20 on the list, so it's there. It's the simple things, isn't it? Waking up, realising it's a Saturday, ordering a takeaway on a Saturday night. I mean, it's these sorts of things. But do let us know this morning, what are the things that make you smile? What are your favourite things in life? Is it the simple things? Is it a stranger's smile, an act of kindness? Is it a cup of tea? Is it just having a lie-in on a Saturday morning? Do let us know. It's a nice chat to have, isn't it?
It is.
With everything that's going on in the world, it's nice to smile about things like that.
Indeed, there's a lot of bad news in the world, so a simple pleasure, a nice brew, a nice early night, a nice takeaway. You know, these are the things we need to get through difficult times, Ellie.
And a reminder of people being kind as well. That's nice as well, isn't it? A dog wagging its tail. I've just seen that one. What's that? 18% of people say that's their favourite thing. A dog wagging their tail. Oh, it is the simple things, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do get in touch with yours this morning. gbvs@gbnews.com. Now, former US President Donald Trump says he's been indicted over his handling of classified documents after he left the White House. He's campaigning to make a return to the White House in 2024.
And also in the US, Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden have agreed on an economic alliance to counter challenges from China. The so-called Atlantic Declaration aims to ensure that Western allies retain control over key sectors of the world economy.
However, both countries have now abandoned the hope for a free trade deal.
Okay, joining us now is the CEO and the founder of the Youth Vote UK, Alexander Cairns. Top of the morning to you, Alexander.
Morning.
Shall we start on Trump? Shall we do a little bit of Trump? So he's been indicted. again. We believe on 7 counts. This pertains to the documents that he had at his Florida estate. We saw on the VT at the top. He hasn't taken it lying down. He's come out and he's blasted it's a hoax. How significant, though, is this indictment in politics in America?
I think it's significant in the sense of, obviously, you know, in history, there hasn't been a living former president that's been indicted twice on a number of different counts. Obviously, doesn't look particularly good. But what's really interesting in American politics is there's nothing actually stopping him running for president again, even though this legal case could go on for a while. Unlikely we'll see prison time, probably a fine. And actually, the popularity isn't really taking a hit. You know, he's quite significantly ahead in the polls.
Yeah.
He's polling at about 55%. DeSantis is about 20%. So significant in the sense of it's never happened before, but politically not hurting him at all, no.
OK.
It's so interesting, isn't it, how it doesn't politically affect his popularity, because you'd think that's the first thing that would happen, but actually it plays into his narrative, doesn't it, of him against the establishment, and if anything, actually bodes well with his supporters.
And that's the really interesting thing. I think a lot of people within the establishment, within the kind of FBI, for example, that are investigating him, need to remember that actually the more that they bring these cases to Trump, the more that actually it strengthens his hand. A lot of the voters think that the establishment are against him, and actually I understand that clearly there was some wrongdoing, but interestingly, the longer that they pursue him, the longer actually it probably helps his case, as you say, yeah.
It's interesting, he's coming out blasting, as you'd imagine. He's saying they're only coming after me because I'm leading in the polls. This is election interference at the highest level. You'd expect no less from him. But what is interesting is they could have called this case in Washington, D.C. and got a jury very favourable to prosecuting him, but instead they're going for it in Florida, where it's more likely to get a sympathetic hearing, and that's, as I understand it, because they want this done with quickly. Is this about actually getting a prosecution, or is it about ensuring he's popular and therefore he's on the ticket? Because the Democrats would like to go against Trump, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I agree. I actually think there's a lot of tactical movements here about, in terms of the state, where it's going to be heard. I think actually you'll find that, like, I agree, the Democrats do want to go against him because I think DeSantis and some of the other candidates have a little bit more of a cleaner slate. Obviously, Trump was the president for a period of time. You know, the Democrats have got a lot of kind of establishment, but actually DeSantis has quite a good record in Florida, and you're seeing that even though he's behind in the polls against Democratic voters when asked who they would support, they actually say Trump, definitely not, but DeSantis, they're a little bit more open to that. So there is some tactics at play for sure, yeah.
Alexander, let's touch upon Rishi in Washington, been there for 2 days this week, failed to secure that US-UK trade deal that's been mooted since 2019, but instead we've got this Atlantic Declaration, which Rishi Sunak has actually said is a better alternative for this insecure world that we're living in. Tell us what you make of that.
Yeah, I'm extremely disappointed. I understand the trip is important to keep the special alliance, strong, but really he's gone over there to get a couple of documents to come back to say, actually, we're going to be working together on things like ensuring that, obviously, from a Chinese perspective, that they're regulated. Obviously, we know that he's gone over there to speak to the US president about AI. Absolutely important things, but the trade deal is very, very important, and this is not a trade deal, far from it. I appreciate that trade deals take a while, and obviously the kind of Department for International Trade has been trying to get a trade deal with India, the US, multiple different countries, Mexico, and I appreciate that these things take time. However, if you are going to promise the British public that you'll have a trade deal in the next 3 years and it doesn't happen, you cannot then say, actually, it's never really been a priority, because the public are smarter than that. They know that obviously you're bluffing.
Yeah, and that full-fat trade deal was promised in the 2019 manifesto pledge from the Conservatives. Of course, we've had the Ukraine war, we've had the pandemic. Nevertheless, when you look at the numbers, this is a 92 million quid trade deal. It's ostensibly around electric vehicles, batteries, minerals, allows access to the Inflation Reduction Act in America. So it's a very limited tranche of companies that will benefit. They're window dressing it on. There's some data sharing. But this is not the special relationship rebuild that we were sold all those times ago. Is this a manifestation of the fact you think that Obama said it, but has Biden put Britain at the back of the queue?
I agree. And actually, we always knew if Biden won, Biden's kind of perspective was similar to Obama's. In their mind, the UK was never top of the queue for kind of a trade deal. I think politically there's been some disagreements about what Rishi's priorities versus what Biden's focusing on. For example, we know that Biden's very heavily focused on the climate. It's not really one of Rishi's top priorities. I also think it's very interesting because probably the reason we haven't had as many trade deals as we should have had is because I think Rishi politically has had to kind of focus on his party. Obviously, Truss resigning, Johnson resigning. The Conservative Party have been very, very busy infighting and not necessarily focusing on the important things, which are trade deals, which take a lot of time. I don't buy that there's this whole argument about we've had COVID and the Ukraine war. The Department for International Trade have had nothing to do with COVID or the war. They could have been focusing on this. It's hard for them to focus on this when they've had different secretaries of state. So I think that the public need to understand that the infighting and the changes in ministers, and really that's not really their top priority, is the reason we don't have a trade deal thus far.
And I mean, you could say, in a sense, the same with Joe Biden. I mean, his priority has not been a trade deal with the UK. I did want to touch upon the rhetoric of the past few days, Alexandra, and what you made of it, because Joe Biden stood there next to Rishi Sunak and spoke about that special relationship and spoke about no country being closer. I mean, how much is that just what Rishi Sunak wants to hear? It's almost as though he's expected to say it and therefore he has to. Do you think it still rings true?
No, I don't, actually. And I think if it did ring true, I think we would have had a trade deal by now. If we are the #1 partner for the United States, which we should be, we do, let's remember, a lot of the companies, a lot of the travel, a lot of the businesses work together very, very closely. And if that was true, we would have had at least a partial or a trade deal would be in sight. The fact that both of them are saying actually it's never been a priority. Since when has it never been a priority? It's always been a priority. And the public, post-Brexit, expected that the US trade deal would be the #1 focus. What we had is Australia and New Zealand, absolutely important. We get wine, meat. I appreciate that's an important trade deal. But the economic benefit is minimal compared to what it will be like if we get a US trade deal. So Rishi Sunak should not be playing this down. We need a trade deal and we should have had it by now.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent analysis. It's been window dressed as a huge victory. A lot of people are saying that this Atlantic Declaration is a declaration of failure, of statecraft, of Britain's ability to wrangle a deal. Is this, do you think, Biden in a holding pattern, waiting for a future government to come along who he probably might get along with a bit better?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's an issue with our kind of political cycle. He knows, potentially, that if Starmer wins, Starmer could have a different perspective. Obviously, naturally, Starmer and Biden probably have more in common. Yeah. Obviously, politically, more centre-left. And that's an issue because I think that Rishi Sunak's come in after Liz Truss not being there for long, Johnson leaving. Biden now, I think, looks at the UK and thinks it's a bit of a political mess, which is an issue for us because we really need that special relationship to be there. Lots of companies, lots of trade. We need the relationship to be strong. And I actually, when I see their body language and the way that they talk, I just think that Biden almost looks down at Sunak. I think he looks at him and thinks, it's a small man, I don't take him that seriously. Sometimes he calls him, how are you, Rishi, not even Mr. Prime Minister. I don't think that there's that...
President, as we have.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. I'm surprised he didn't fall asleep in the meeting. I generally actually think that it's not the best relationship, and I think the media understand that now, and I think his spin doctors are trying to spin it. They work closely together. Yeah. But I mean, the fact is, people are not stupid. They know that really the respect is not on the same level at all.
Alexander Cairns, an excellent start to the day. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Good to see you. OK, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
And actress Nikki Sanderson is due to give evidence in High Court in London against the publisher of The Mirror for alleged unlawful information gathering. The former Corrie star is suing the company for damages, claiming that journalists use methods like phone hacking and deception.
A 3-year-old British girl injured in a knife attack in the French Alps is reportedly now in a stable condition in hospital. 4 children and 2 adults were injured at a playground in the alpine town of Annecy. It's understood the knifeman is a Syrian national who had refugee status in Sweden. France has rejected the man's asylum demands earlier this month.
And Boris Johnson has allegedly been given the findings of a Privileges Committee investigation into whether he misled Parliament over Partygate. The Times newspaper says the panel of MPs has sent the former Prime Minister a draft of their report. If the inquiry finds against him, he could face suspension from the House of Commons or even a by-election.
Now, trust in the police is hanging by a thread. That's according to the Chief Inspector of Constabulary.
Yeah, the watchdog investigating police failings has called for legal powers to change behaviour after a year in which 7 police forces have been put into special measures.
Well, it comes as a teenager has died after being followed on his e-scooter by police in Salford last night. It mirrors events in Cardiff that led to rioting by local youths.
And let's speak now to former Met Police Chief Superintendent Kevin Hurley. Top of the morning to you, Kevin. So another day, another bad news story for the beleaguered British Constabulary. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, the actual analysis of the report is quite right. I think public trust in the police has been falling for some time. And I think it's got very little to do with the odd media-grabbing headline. It's to do with the fact that police are not seen visibly on the streets, with the impact that robbery on our streets, outside our railway stations, outside the chip shop and so on is a real concern for people, as well as the fact it's very difficult to get through to the police and report the fact you've been burgled or your car's been broken into. And such is the state of the police now in terms of numbers and commitments. You very often will get no investigation whatsoever on a burglary or any investigation whatsoever on having your car broken into. People judge by what they see or what they feel personally or what they hear personally. And most people are not particularly affected by the odd headline like that. The fact of the matter is, we're in a situation now where a lot of people, if they get the car broken into and so on, can't be bothered to phone up the police and they're left hanging on. That kind of failure in customer service, and that's what it is, if it were any other business, would be very damaging. And of course, in the case of the police, the public have got nowhere else to go. Actually, it isn't really the fault of the individual constables out on patrol and so on. It's the fault of many, many years of swinging cuts, many, many years of cutting training capability, very poor terms and conditions of service now relative to what people can get. And as a result, people are leaving soon after they join in quite large numbers, even with Boris's 20,000 brand new fees to try and make up for the 40-odd thousand police staff that were cut before by Theresa May. These people are brand new, got very little idea how to go about their job in terms of their experience. And of course, with things like the collapse of mental health treatment in the community, large numbers of police officers are tied up on every shift, dealing with, picking up, and then guarding mentally disordered people in A&Es in hospitals, because there's no mental health hospitals to take them to anymore for people to be admitted. So he's quite right in that report. You know, the product that the police deliver for us has really dropped off. And yeah, you can, and I have been there, you can try and, I suppose, put some more pressure on police. But the one thing that people don't realise about a police officer is that when they go outside the police station on their own, you cannot make her or him be productive or do their job. If their morale's been allowed to collapse, or they haven't got the competency, or they're overwhelmed, you're not going to get the service we want. And a few of these little incidents that we see occurring are neither here nor there. This kind of thing, like the kid who was being followed by police on a trying to get away from police on a stolen e-bike. Well, that's the job of the police. They're there to pursue criminals as safely as they can. But if someone on an e-bike drives into the front of a passing ambulance, the police can't do much about that. So we'll have a big fuss around that. But in the end, you know, the job of the police is chase the criminal. And if the criminal, even if they're a 15, 16-year-old kid, run into the front of an ambulance, that's not the police's fault.
Kevin, how damaging do you think those high-profile cases such as Cousins and Carrick serving Metropolitan Police officers who've been found guilty of, well, murder and rape in the case of Cousins, serious sexual offences, How much do you think that has fed into this crisis of trust in police forces? Or do you think it is actually just the basics, as you say, it's the basics that aren't being done right, and people want to see police fighting crime on the streets and seeing them actually tackling issues head on?
Well, no doubt those two cases, in particular, the Sarah Everard murder by her cousins, the abduction and murder, was horrific. I mean, I personally, if it were in my power, would have taken him off and hanged him. That is my if you like, my horror that someone who wore the same uniform as I did could do such a thing. But of course, there's also an issue here, the failure of some police leadership to manage the narrative. What people don't realise about the cousins thing, horrific as it was, is he was caught extremely quickly, and the leading judge at the Old Bailey, and I almost quote him when I say this, said, "After 30 years as a judge, I want to commend the investigation team for the fastest, most wide-ranging, technically competent investigation I've ever seen, and I want to personally commend a number of the senior detectives." What he was doing is saying, what a fantastic investigative capability the Metropolitan Police have got. That's all been lost in that narrative, and continually plays back. If you don't tell a different story and let people know, hey, it was dreadful, we the police loathe what that man did, but in fact, outside bodies, namely the chief judge in the country, said what a fantastic capability police have got to investigate serious crime. If you don't put that narrative out, then it allows it to be continually spun up by the media, and one would understand why they would, because they need copy, but it then further damages it. But the bottom line, and the point you made then, was it's what people personally experience or feel. You know, if you're living, I don't know, on the Isle of Wight or in Northumbria, that incident down in London is a long way away from you. But if, when you're coming home from work in the evening, you're being intimidated as you go shopping in your shopping centre, or police aren't turning up when there are people causing a real disturbance on your council estate, or you've heard your friends being burgled and police really have done very little, that's what damages your confidence.
OK, Kevin, the figures speak for themselves. 6% of burglaries are cleared up, 30,000 unsolved muggings, 37,000 mental health call-outs, 120,000 non-crime hate incidents, police wasting time on tweets and not policing the streets. What's the answer to this mess? You mentioned the way the top brass think, you mentioned numbers. Is it the type of copper being recruited, though? Back in your day, Kev, no doubt there'd be a lot of former veterans in there, people with streetwise experience. It's part of the problem we're recruiting graduates who just don't know how to work the streets.
No, well, I mean, I was a graduate when I joined more than 40 years ago, and we already had a large number of graduates. And for many years, the Metropolitan Police was the largest employer of graduates in London. It's not that. Indeed, having a degree does say one thing, that you're competent to research, to write stuff. We do want our police to be well educated, but the problem with it is, and I will make this point, you are right, the demographic of who joins has changed, because the actual terms and conditions are much poorer. I would not join the police, even though I really enjoyed it, but I would not join it now on the terms and conditions and in an organisation which essentially is so poorly led in terms of putting out a counter-narrative about how the police operate. The thing is about the police, nobody will ever like them, because why would anyone want to like someone who says you can't speed, you can't make a load of noise when you come out of a wine bar at night? The police have got powers over us for which none of us like to be told by the police, i.e. to be police. But people can, if you like, respect or value them. And without that, it makes it a much less attractive employer. The issue on it is that the ethos of why they're there has been lost. It's been spread, if you like, watered down, instead of a basic ethos of you are there to protect the people and control the streets. When we're confronted by wrongdoing, we will not lose. The public expect us to go forward and protect them, and that's what we're going to do. You know, we've got a situation now where you'll get disorder develop in the evening on various council estates all over the country. Police with limited numbers will turn up, and they'll probably end up being chased away by the local yobbery, to be quite honest. And the reasons then how that'll be managed the next day at the management meeting in police stations all over the country is a decision was made by the sergeant or the inspector to withdraw to maintain community tranquility. Of course, that's completely wrong, because the community are the bus driver, the postman, the school dinner lady, the disabled veteran, the retired gardener who will live on that council estate and see the police withdraw in the face of a bunch of yobs and are then left at the mercy of that bunch of yobs who generally terrorise that estate. And kind of, if you like, values an ethos where police would mass as many people from local areas as they could, go back onto that estate and nick every single one of those jobs has been lost. But that is actually how you bring
Kev,
peace,
we're going
tranquility and public confidence to an estate.
We're going to have to cut in there, Kevin. I think a lot of people listening today would agree with you. Maybe get back to basics. Let's nick some people. Let's lock some people up, and let's get the cops back in control and not the yobs. Thank you very much, Kevin Hurdy. Excellent analysis. Appreciate that.
OK, stay with us, because coming up we'll have more on the Annecy attack and an update on the injured 3-year-old British girl. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back at 6:28. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ali. Please remember to get in touch all the usual ways, and that's gbviews@gbnews.com, or of course on Twitter @gbnews.
Now, dozens of tributes, including flowers and teddy bears, have been left overnight following a frenzied knife attack in Annecy in southeastern France.
And a British child was among the 6 adults and children who were stabbed yesterday in a lakeside park in the French Alps. The knife men had been denied asylum in France just days before.
Well, GB News' Home and Security editor Mark White has the story.
Captured on phone video by a horrified onlooker, the moment this suspect walks from a children's play park just seconds after a frenzied stabbing attack. His victims, the young and the vulnerable. He is a Syrian refugee, granted asylum in Sweden. His motivation is still unknown, but this was the most horrifying of attacks. As he walked away from the carnage, sometimes breaking into a jog, He was followed by some brave members of the public who only had their backpacks for protection, as he still wielded the knife he used to cause so much harm. Police arrived within 4 minutes of the first call, shooting, then arresting the suspect. Former Liverpool footballer Anthony Letalic captured these images of the arrest. He'd been in the park running as the dramatic events unfolded.
I was trying to work out what happened, and all of a sudden a mother shouts, "Run, run! Someone's stabbing everyone by the side of the lake. He stabbed children. Run, run!" And I was a bit shocked. I carried on, and I came face to face with the guy, and there are police just a few metres behind him trying to catch him. Comes towards me, and I try to get out of the way and see that he's heading straight for grandmas and grandpas. And then he attacks a grandpa. He stabs him once, and the police are still trying to get hold of him. So I told the police, "Shoot him, he's stabbing everyone."
In total, 4 children and 2 adults were stabbed before the suspect was apprehended. Medics rushed the most seriously injured to waiting air ambulances. One of the victims was flown over the Swiss border to a major trauma centre in Geneva. Authorities say the suspect had lived in Sweden for the past decade and had married a Swedish woman before apparently separating earlier this year and moving to France. In this beautiful alpine tourist resort, it was perhaps inevitable that some of the victims would be overseas tourists from countries including the UK and the Netherlands. The reason why they were targeted in this most horrific way is still to be established. Mark White, GB News.
It's an astonishing mixture of emotions you feel about that, Ellie. As a parent, you're initially horrified. That could be any playground, could be any of our children. And then I think utter revulsion at this individual, just to randomly go about this kind of malicious carnage. He was taken down by police, incapacitated. He wasn't shot dead. Some people may think he may have deserved that. Who knows?
It must be hard for you as a father as well. I think we were just talking about that whilst that report played out. It is very difficult. I'm not a mother, but I'm very moved and very upset, obviously, watching that. But, when you're a parent, you just think it could be, like you said, in a playground anywhere. It's very traumatic. There's a video of the actual attack going around. I'm not saying to have a look at it, but it shows something which I think strikes terror into the heart of any parent. And that is this guy's going for a kid in a buggy while the mother's standing by, and it freezes you with terror and then just a righteous anger, I think. That how can this happen, in a Western country? We don't against the politics. He's an asylum seeker. We can't go down the route of that's what it was all about, although it seems to be tipped over the edge by the fact he was refused recently. But we have to learn lessons from this. And I think, let us know what you think out there, because we have a situation now where we're not quite sure who's coming to our own country. When we see things like this, I think we have to ask big questions that need big, bold solutions, because the outcome, things like this, is utterly, utterly contemptible and unacceptable in any civilised society. I mean, children in buggies, I think the youngest, we believe, according to reports, is just 22 months old. So literally in a buggy, the most vulnerable of our society, and out with their mothers in the park. I mean, there was some comment about not enough men stepping in to help. I haven't watched the video, I couldn't bring myself to. But it's vulnerable people, it's women and children. But there was one fella who chased him off with a backpack. He must have saved lives. He deserves a real honour, that guy. Well, let's hope he gets one. He deserves a real honour, because people were standing by. What would you do? I mean, you'd be... It's so otherworldly. It's fight or flight, isn't it? How would we know how we would react? So you can't judge in that moment. But one thing for sure, we have to learn lessons from things like this. Yeah, of course, and that is, of course, all being investigated at the moment. We will bring that to you on GB News as we start to understand more about what went on in Annecy. But we will, of course, bring that to you on GB News. But do stay with us, because we've got lots more to come, including all of the other stories making the headlines in this morning's newspapers. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Good morning, welcome back. The time is 6:36. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. And we are talking today about your favourite things. What are the things in your life that bring you joy, that put a smile on your face, that really brighten up your life? And we're talking about this because on page 3 of the Daily Mail today, it's Life's Simple Pleasures, the top 20. So lovely list, this one. Number 1 is actually a random act of kindness. You know, so somebody perhaps opening the door for you, or paying for your coffee, or, you know, something very simple like that. Slipping into freshly laundered sheets, I can understand that one. Receiving an unexpected gift is number 3. Packing for a sunny holiday, that's a lovely feeling, isn't it? And down at number 20 is an afternoon nap, which is what I'll be doing later.
I like that one there, number 6, discovering forgotten cash in your pocket. And if I find a £5 in a suit jacket, I'm made up.
Yeah, it's
for the
a
whole
great
day.
feeling.
Oh, what, £5 now doesn't even buy you a pint in a lot of pubs.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it's the random act of finding it really does put a little spring in my step.
It's lovely, isn't it? And you said tea. Tea is one of your random joys. That's on there, number 13.
Yep.
So we've been asking you today, what are your favourite things in life? What are the things that bring you joy? Lots of you getting in touch. David says, what makes me happy is a nice trip on a Saturday morning to the garden centre. I like to go for breakfast and a browse.
Totally. And Karen, this is an attainable goal that we can all do. Karen, I love slipping into my PJs after work and chilling.
Yeah, and that's what I like about this list. It's simple things.
Yeah.
You know, we don't spend money. Keith in Anglesey says it's the sight of the sea when you're driving to the coast on a seaside holiday. That first sight of the sea, that is a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I always say that to my kids. First to spot the sea, we'll get an ice cream. And now they're like, well, we'll both get one anyway, Dad. So even they're grizzled cynics. And interestingly...
Well, they have been raised by you, Martin.
True. But we all get a little bit more cynical because the peak age of being chidden by these things is...
Yeah, 32.
32.
It's apparently the age that we feel the most joy.
And after that, it's all downhill.
Apparently, according to the Daily Mail. Yeah. And Alicia says, for me, there are 3 favourite things. The first is freshly cut grass, then the smell of a casserole cooking and fresh bread. And then a bed with crisp white linen. That's nice, isn't it?
That sounds like an ideal little day there.
It's a nice ideal
Mow the
day.
lawn, have a nice bit of food and crack on for an early night. I think you've got it nailed, Alicia.
Lovely. It's making me smile hearing about your favourite things. And we need that today because the news is very, very heavy. So do keep them coming in. What are your favourite things? What puts a smile on your face? What brings light to your life? Do share with us today. GBnews@gbnews.com.
OK, and now let's bring you up to date with the rest of the morning's front pages.
Which might not be filled with joyful things, I'm afraid.
That's true, because the Eye reports on the so-called Atlantic Declaration. Britain and US rewrite the special relationship.
The Metro leads with the attack by a refugee in France. Horror at the playground, stabbed in their pushchairs, says the headline.
And the Sun, understandably, also leads on the same story. Pram horror on France holiday. British girl, aged 3, knifed in the park.
The Times reports on the crisis in the mortgage market. HSBC becomes the big lender to withdraw loans with only hours' notice.
Well, joining us now to go through the papers in more detail this morning is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, alongside writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Top of the morning to both of you. So, Nigel, before we go into the stories, peak age for things that cheer you up, 32. Sorry to predict. You may
I'm obviously way out of that one now.
But what kind of things really cheer you? What little things?
Well, looking at the list, I was a bit surprised to see a cup of tea, a morning cup of tea at number 13 on the Daily Mail list. That I'd put. Well, I don't drink tea, but I have a coffee first thing in the morning. Great. That's a great start to the morning.
Is that your number one, do you think?
I think that might go to my number one, and then we would certainly go for the afternoon nap, especially after doing a breakfast show.
Yeah, beautiful. And OK, so segueing into your story, Rishi has been in America. A small act of kindness, or has he come home once again with an empty deal for Britain?
Well, no deal at all, really, which is the problem there. This much heralded Atlantic Declaration is really a statement of intent. What he hasn't come back with, although he never thought he would get it, would be the kind of trade deal that we were promised with America following Brexit, and was also in the 2019 Conservative election manifesto. Yeah. We're not getting any of that. Some of the good things that come out of this, I think that finally we've ditched this idea of special relationship. The Americans never liked it very much. We were the ones who kept pushing it. And I think probably it's had its day that Rishi Sunak now calls it the indispensable alliance. A lot more syllables in that, but anyway, it's good that the special relationship has sort of bitten the dust.
But we were promised a full, fat trade deal. This is 92 million quid's worth of stuff around green energy, car batteries and solar panels. There's nothing in there for British businesses on the whole. There's nothing in there for British farmers. It's an advantageous access to exporting to America. This is a one-way ticket to America.
Yes, that's right. I mean, this is the point about it. There's nothing. Everything we were promised before hasn't come to pass. Now, obviously, had President Trump stayed around a bit longer, it maybe we'd have got that trade deal, but he seemed a lot keener on it than President Biden certainly.
You're pro-Trump now, are you, Nigel?
Sorry?
You're pro-Trump all of a sudden?
Oh, no, I'm not pro-Trump at all. I hope he doesn't come back as president, although I fear he might. But in fairness, he was the one who was most likely to give us a proper trade deal.
OK, so Candice, turning to you now, is this Rishi's fault? Or is it symptomatic of the fact that actually Joe Biden just has a rather dim view of the United Kingdom?
It's possible. I think that the world has changed since Brexit. I mean, there are all sorts of different concerns that have emerged since then. I find it quite interesting that it's been reported as cooperation now that we're having a more adversarial relationship with China. So they were saying things like, we're going to be cooperating on artificial intelligence because apparently that's going to be crucial to the future of warfare. Kind of gives you a shudder. You don't even want to think about that. But I think it's important that we do work together on those things.
Candice, let's stick with you, shall we? In the Daily Telegraph, and Kyiv has begun its counter-offensive. We've been talking about this for a long time, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Everyone's been talking about the Ukraine counter-offensive. So this is on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. They've launched it. We're going to have to see how it progresses. Apparently, they have met stiff resistance, according to this article, from the Russians. And the Ukrainians are understandably being quite cagey about it. They don't want to reveal too much. They obviously need a breakthrough. I mean, things have just been getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, you've got the blowing up of this dam in southern Ukraine, which has apparently destroyed a lot of the grain fields. Things are just getting worse and worse and worse for Ukraine. And I don't see how it's going to be for them in the future. They are on their knees now.
OK, Nigel, let's move on to another story. This is one that's sure to get pulses racing, I think, in GB News land. and that is the transgender doctor row. This is on the front page of the Daily Mail today. Patients have no right to know if their doctor is trans.
Yeah, I think the headline goes a bit further than the small print does when you look into it, that probably common sense will come into play, and it will be up to care providers to decide whether this policy would be introduced. But the idea broadly is that if you want to see a woman doctor, you might well end up with a trans male, or if you want to see a man, a trans female. And the question then comes down to, can you refuse to do that? The suggestion is, if you feel really strongly about it, yes, you can. It does seem to me that there's no reason why a trans doctor is any different from any other doctor. And so on the basis of that, I certainly would have no problem seeing a trans doctor or a non-binary doctor, and I would be happy to use whatever pronouns that they preferred. So whatever would make them feel comfortable is fine. But I'm sure that there will be certainly some women who might find it uncomfortable, and it sounds like they would make provision for that.
Well, I mean, you'd hope so. It does say, to be fair, that if a patient, a female patient, I think this is about women's safety, personally, and if they've suffered a sexual trauma or violence, or it's an intimate examination, they have the right to refuse, which may or may not be kind of undertaken. But it goes further, and that is, I think, this is, Candice, this is about, forget about patient first. This is like pronouns and pride first, because it says in here, this is a part of a drive for inclusivity and diversity, but patients don't care about that. Don't patients have the right to choose who inspects and examines them?
Well, yes, certainly. Whenever I've been in undergoing a breast examination or a gynecological examination, I've always been told, would you prefer a female to do this? And it's always been made very plain to me that I can have someone of the same sex carry out that examination. So I think that's commonplace anyway. And personally, I don't have a strong preference. I had a male midwife when I was giving birth. He was amazing. But for many women, they do. And they absolutely need to be able to do that, because there are very good reasons why people would not like to be examined in those moments by someone of the opposite sex.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I just worry, Nigel, that this is actually a shift of not the patient being first, but the feelings of doctors and the NHS first. That's not the way it should be. No, it should be the patient should be king, the customer is king. We're paying for this.
Yes, I kind of read into it. It wasn't actually a matter of putting doctors first in this case. It was just being a bit more inclusive about a doctor's feelings. So it seemed to me reasonable to actually say, I mean, I'm presuming that they would be quite happy to admit to their patients that they are trans or non-binary or whatever, because if they want particular pronouns used, that would give a clue to the patient that this is what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
OK, Candice, let's go to a really horrific story that I know is upsetting, of course, so many people around the world today, and it is this park horror in Annecy in southeastern France, and a British girl, just 3 years old, still fighting for her life.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I was actually very concerned I would be able to keep my composure with this story. I mean, I have children the same age, many people do. Everyone was shocked by this story yesterday. I mean, this... what we know about him so far, his name is Abdel Masih H. We know that he's a Syrian refugee. Apparently, he has a 3-year-old child as well. So you wonder what would motivate a father to attack other children like this. I mean, it's the most horrifying thing you can imagine, a playground turned into a scene of murder. Apparently, he has no psychiatric history that we know of, but I can't imagine why you would do something like this unless you were deranged in some way. One thing, though, that really struck me watching the footage of this, though, was the bravery of the bystanders who were pushing him away with backpacks, a knife with backpacks. I think when you see children being hurt, maybe something primal emerges. And you don't run away, you fight.
That's the guy there. For those who can't see the image, there's a guy with a backpack who'd been in the park at the same time, and he was swinging his backpack at the knife man while the attack was going on. The knife man actually went for the guy with the backpack at one point and tried to take him out too, but he persisted in trying to shoo him away.
It's incredible.
So that guy needs some sort of open bravery medal
100%.
In France, an absolute hero of the day. But Nigel, the next question surely needs to be, are these events likely to become more commonplace? Because we effectively don't know who is getting into countries. We don't know where they come from oftentimes. We don't know their backgrounds. We take it as, we take their word they're fleeing a war zone. Is this an isolated incident, or could it become more commonplace?
That's what we don't know. I think that we have to now not try and extrapolate from this one incident that there is a problem with asylum seekers in every country. We know it wasn't Islamist terrorism because the guy is a Christian. We don't know what motivated him. It may be, as Candice said, that he's deranged or whatever. It certainly sounds like that. But to try and draw an inference that we are at risk then from asylum seekers based on this one case, I think it's probably going a bit too far.
And we're also not aware of all the details in this case just yet. They will reveal themselves in the next few days. There is an investigation underway in Annecy, of course. We'll bring that to you on GB News. But Nigel, Candice, really, really good to see you both this morning. You're back with us in the next hour, aren't you?
Thank you.
Now, it has been so wonderful presenting this very show for the past 6 months. It has been a joy and a privilege. But we know that so many of you have been emailing every single weekend asking where our lovely Anne Diamond is. I just want to say, by the way, it's been a privilege working with you. So thank you so much. You too.
You've been so kind and welcoming to me. Anyhow, well, last night she spoke to Dan Wootton in an exclusive interview explaining why Anne Diamond has been absent for this long. And she started by telling him it was quite a journey.
My last appearance on GB News was on the 1st of January. And I knew then that I would be going away for a while. And I haven't been on a world cruise, which is what I know that social media has been saying. Oh, she's gone on one of her cruises, because I'm well known now for loving cruises. It hasn't been a world cruise. It's been a fight against breast cancer. That's what it's been. It's been a long journey. And 5 months later, I'm still not at the end of the journey, but I'm through it enough to come back to work.
So you were diagnosed with breast cancer, Anne, on the day that you found out you were being awarded this OBE. So I guess from a real high to probably one of the toughest moments of your life, I imagine.
That morning, I got an email from the Cabinet Office saying, congratulations, you are to be awarded OBE for my Cot Death campaign. And it was a wonderful moment, and that was like 9:30 in the morning. But I knew then, because I'd already seen my GP, that I had to go to a breast cancer screening thing later in the morning. And I thought I would just go for a mammogram and, a couple of tests, and I'd be free in an hour. And I spent the entire morning at my local hospital. They did everything: biopsies, x-rays, CT scans, couple of mammograms, everything. And in the end, by lunchtime, I was still there. And a lovely lady with a lanyard around her neck that said, Macmillan Cancer Care. And I knew then that it was serious.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what treatment you have had and how the cancer is now?
I had the full work, the full mastectomy.
Wow.
God, this is the first time I've talked about it. So it's quite difficult, but I've had the full works. The first operation I had was 9 hours long. I mean, I don't remember it. It was I was in and out like that, but 9 hours of removal and rebuild. And that took a lot of getting over. And then I had a lymphectomy where they take out lymph nodes later as well, just to make sure they can trace the travel, if the cancer has travelled at all, to the rest of the body. Luckily, I don't think they did. And I've had a load of radiotherapy, which I found very hard too. So it's been a journey, but I'm not pretending for a minute that I am extraordinary, because I am fully aware that, a quarter of women in this country are going through what I've just gone through. And I don't have any advice to give. I only have empathy.
I have had so many GB News viewers approach me in the street and say, what's happened to Anne? And I had some idea of what was going on, obviously wouldn't say anything and would just say, Anne's going to be back. And it is going to be so brilliant to have you. So from Saturday morning, you're back on Breakfast.
Yes, I am. I'm really pleased to be back. It's great. It's great to be back. I'll be back with Stephen.
Oh, she's so brave, isn't she?
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. And, you know, it has been difficult for the past 6 months because I've had so many messages and emails saying, you know, what's happening with Anne? Is she OK? Is she fine? And it's very difficult. It's not your news to share, you know. So we have just said, you know, she's well, she's fine. But she has been, as she says in her own words, on a journey, and she's so brave.
Yeah, and coming back tomorrow, but obviously still raw, still undergoing treatment. I think everyone's going to be really chuffed to have her back. You know, what a sort of triumph over what could have been a tragedy. The bittersweet, you know, news of the OBE on the same day as finding out that news, but she's going to be back right there.
Yep.
Tomorrow morning.
She is. So I'm sure you're going to welcome her with open arms. It's going to be wonderful to have her back after 6 long months away. So do let us know what you think of that and your best wishes to Anne, I'm sure. gbnews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us because we're going to be talking about cash. Do you use cash?
Very rarely. I do like it though if it's cold and it folds.
Oh, yeah, you like that. Well, apparently cash is no longer king. We'll find out more shortly. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. For many of us, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. Low cloud out there, but that will retreat to the coast, leaving sunny spells for most. But changes are on their way. It's about to turn more humid. It's about to turn hotter. And there'll be some thundery showers by tomorrow. Low pressure is approaching from the southwest very slowly, but it does tend to veer the winds so that we're going to see more of a southerly component during the next few days. That will bring in the higher levels of humidity. And we've already seen the first signs of that overnight with some medium level cloud and a few light showers towards the far southwest. But for most, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. A lot of low cloud around. Very quickly, that low cloud retreats back to North Sea coast where it remains in the afternoon, keeping things again on the cool side, mid-teens at best on that east coast. But inland with the sunshine, mid-20s, 26, 27 Celsius possible central southern England, albeit with some medium-level cloud. And we're going to see these showers reappear later in the day, with Cornwall mostly affected, but some of them pushing into Devon through the night as well, drifting into Pembrokeshire, probably Ireland as well. But for the rest of the UK, it's low cloud once again pushing in. A marked temperature contrast overnight. The low single figures for parts of Scotland, but 16 or 17 Celsius for the southwest. That's a sign of the increased humidity that is moving northeastwards across the country on Saturday. And with the change in wind direction and the increased humidity, we're going to see some particularly high temperatures, notable compared with what we've seen recently across central and southeastern parts. 30, 31 Celsius possible. Real significant change for the likes of East Anglia compared with recent weather, and mid-20s possible for western and southern Scotland as well. But with that increased temperature and humidity, the risk of some severe thunderstorms in places on Saturday across central areas, elsewhere on Sunday.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Friday the 9th of June. Coming up this morning.
Former US President Donald Trump has been charged with 7 counts, including willfully retaining national defence secrets. But never a man to take things willingly lying down. Here's what he had to say.
I'm an innocent man, I'm an innocent person. They had the Mueller hoax, the Mueller report, and that came out, no collusion after 2.5 years. That was set up by Hillary Clinton and Democrats, but this is what they do. This is what they do so well.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak was busy signing the Atlantic Declaration with Joe Biden, hailing it the indispensable alliance as countries begin to close ranks on China.
Well, Mr. President, I just demoted you, Mr. Prime Minister. It's great to have you back.
The knifeman who stabbed a group of children at a playground yesterday in Annecy, southeastern France, had been denied asylum just days before the attack. That's according to the French Interior Minister. 4 children, including one 3-year-old British girl, remain in hospital in a stable condition.
And as always, we'll bring you your latest weather update.
A subtle change in wind direction will bring dramatic changes to our weather. Increased heat, increased humidity, but the chance for some of thunderstorms. Find out more in the GB News forecast coming up soon.
Top of the morning and happy Friday. I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Hello. So the news is very heavy today. It's quite intense, isn't it? So we're having a lovely chat this morning, as well as all of the serious stuff that you need to know about. We're also talking about your favourite things in the world. What are the things that put a smile on your face? And there's a wonderful table of life's simple pleasures, the top 20 in the Daily Mail today. A random act of kindness is actually number 1 of things that make people happy.
It is, and slipping into freshly laundered sheets at 32%. And my favourite there is discovering forgotten cash in your inside pocket. 28%, that £5 note, even a pound coin. Cheers me up.
Oh, it is. I just love the fact they're all so simple, these things. We don't need a lot, do we, to put a smile on our face and make us feel happy. I mean, laughing until your stomach hurts, that's a great one. I love that feeling.
Watching a film in your PJs, there you go, 21%, that's it, Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
It became like a national pastime, but it's something that just cheers you up, just that, switch off, kids are in bed, just relax, get a takeaway, have a little bevy.
We love our naps as well. It says they're waking up on a Saturday and realising it's Saturday, so being able to have a lie-in. And also having an afternoon nap, apparently, is number 20. Well, you've been sharing your favourite things this morning. Maria says, when my grandchildren throw their arms around me. That is so sweet.
I mean, that really shows you that, even in the cost of living crisis, certain things are just absolutely priceless.
And are free.
Yeah, you can't put a price on anything like that. Stephen is saying, maybe this is Stephen Dixon
from Spain.
He says, waking up to see Ellie on GB News. We'll make the most of it, because you're here today.
One day only, Stephen.
And
Take it
Diamond's
in.
back tomorrow. What else we got?
Lorraine says, what makes me happy is marrying my wife, Sarah, last year after 30 years of being together. I also love sitting in the garden in the sun, having a nice bottle of wine, and I can relate to that.
Well, that's great, Lorraine. It took you 30 years to get there, but you did in the end.
Congratulations to you.
Congrats, and enjoy a nice cold wine in the sun today.
Yeah, Vivian says, having a cold glass of Prosecco in the garden on a hot evening, that's a lovely feeling, and a brand new magazine to look through.
There's a common theme here of enjoying the sun and enjoying a cold drink, and hey, there's going to be a lot more of that tonight. And finally, Rosie says it, echoing the point made by Maria, a big hug from my beautiful granddaughter. Bless you.
It's so lovely, and it's making us smile, isn't it? And we need that this morning.
100%.
So do let us know what your favourite things are in the world. What brings a smile to your face? What brightens up your life? Do share with us today. gbnews@gbnews.com. And you can also get in touch on all the other stories that we're talking about today, which we will be sharing throughout the programmes. Do keep them coming in. Now, Donald Trump is expected to be charged with willful retention of national defence information while being accused of obstructing justice. He's campaigning to make a return to the White House in 2024.
And also in the US, Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden have agreed on an economic alliance to counter challenges from China. The so-called Atlantic Declaration aims to ensure Western allies retain control over key sectors of the world economy.
However, both countries have now abandoned the hope for a free trade deal.
What joins us now is former Labour advisor and associate editor of Labour Uncut, Kevin Marr. Top of the morning to you, Kevin. So the Tories promised a full-fat trade agreement in their 2019 manifesto. Doesn't feel like that. Has Rishi come home with the bacon, or is this a bit of a pig with lipstick?
It's a long way short of a free trade agreement. That's clear. I think the ambition in 2019 in the Tory manifesto was probably unrealistic anyway. And I think Rishi Sunak is probably ruining what he's inherited as a commitment. Clearly, British politics has been through the ringer in the last 3 or 4 years. And Rishi Sunak is 2 prime ministers on from the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who made that commitment in the Tory manifesto. What he's managed to get in this Atlantic Declaration, I think, is build a rapport with President Biden, who he seems to get on with very well. I think the Americans probably just look at this very brutally and say, excuse me, in 12 months' time, there's going to be a British general election. Rishi Sunak might not be there. What's the point of spending a lot of time and capital and energy negotiating a free trade deal with the British government that might not be there in 12 months? And if we're going to do it, let's perhaps wait and see what happens and whether Rishi Sunak returns to office or he's replaced. So I think there's some brutal realpolitik there. But there's also, between the two countries, a real sense of the need to cooperate to get control of global supply chains and to kind of halt the advance of China, I think, in particular, which is a real concern for the Americans. And actually, you know, President Biden's big legacy is this what's called this Inflation Reduction Act, which is you know, a real attempt to ground the US economy in the industries of the future, massive investments in infrastructure, massive investments in green technology, and a real sense of, you know, that America needs to kind of reorder the economic world. And Biden sees Sunak as a real ally in trying to do that. So you know, Rishi Sunak walks away from Washington having been treated very, very well, I think, by the White House. He's not got a free trade deal. He was never going to get one in reality. But what he's got is, I think, an important basis for international diplomacy, economic diplomacy going forwards. Now, whether that translates into votes at the next general election is a moot point. But I think it's an important day and it's an important moment.
Kevin, what did you make of the rhetoric of the past few days in Washington? Because you said there that Rishi Sunak was treated very well at the White House. Joe Biden, when he was stood next to Rishi Sunak, spoke about that special relationship and described Britain as no other country being as close to the US as Britain. But how much does he have to say that when he stood next to the British Prime Minister? How much is that just expected of him? And if he weren't to say that, it would look as though something is wrong.
I mean, clearly, with these occasions, there's always a level of artifice with international diplomacy. Anyway, everybody seems to be the best mate of the person that they're with. But I think there genuinely is a moment here where America looks and says, "Look, Britain is a very reliable ally in lots and lots of spheres, and in the economy. When we're looking at international supply chains, when there is this, in a sense of kind of an economic Cold War that's starting to emerge between the West and China, that America wants to make sure that it and the West stay in pole position. So it naturally looks to Britain as an ally to help to do that. So I think it is a significant moment. We're on twin tracks here. Rishi Sunak's getting a lot of criticism for this is not the free trade deal that you explicitly promised in your Tory manifesto. That's true. This is something else. It's similar in a sense to the AUKUS deal with Australia about nuclear submarines. It's more looking at old international alliances in the West. Can they be re-energized and repurposed for what is a big economic threat in China? And where China is an economic threat, they don't want it to become a political threat, a diplomatic threat or a military threat. So there's a real sense to say, can we get our house in order as the West? Can we look at bringing some of our industries back on shore, which is what Biden has been so focused on doing, with great success so far. This is an extension of very much of that approach.
Let's get to the numbers, though. The brass tacks, the brutal brass tacks, are quite simple. This is a £92 million trade deal. That's only 2/3 of what the UK gives in foreign aid to Nigeria in 1 year. It's focused ostensibly on electric batteries, on solar energies, and that means that British companies can sell into America with this preferential £3,000 equivalent tax credit. This is a deal that favours America. It doesn't favour British business in general. It's about green renewables. Here we go again. We know that that's a common theme between these two governments. But here's my question to you. It's one thing to sit around, Kev, and criticise Rishi Sunak, but what would Labour do any differently?
Well, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, was over in Washington in America just last week, meeting a lot of people in the Biden administration to basically look at what he's doing in terms of this Inflation Reduction Act and to try and produce a British version of it, which is again about big focus on infrastructure, investment in industries of the future, particularly around refitting, decarbonising our economies and refitting, our energy supply for the future challenges. So Labour is looking at Biden saying, actually, look, there's some pretty big meaty stuff that the Americans are doing. Can we do something similar? And I suspect, to be fair, the Conservatives themselves are probably looking at some of these things as well and saying we need to be doing these things as well. We've been proven to be very vulnerable in terms of our energy supply with obviously the war in Ukraine and Russia turning the taps off and the effect that's had on gas supply, particularly in the West. And obviously our bills have gone up, astronomically as a result of that. So there's a need to look at, economic security. And I think that's very much the theme of yesterday. Very much the theme of this Atlantic Declaration is about economic security and keeping the West in pole position in these very important industries and these very important supply chains and the minerals that are needed for so many of our components for our technologies to make sure that we're alive to the growing threat that China poses.
OK, Kevin Moore, thank you for your input this morning. That was excellent. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Now, lots of you getting in touch on Rishi Sunak's trip to Washington. John says the only special relationship is Rishi Sunak helping Joe Biden to cross the road. I can't even hear Sleepy Joe talk.
I mean, that's probably a bit harsh, although, to be fair, here's a guy that trips over a sandbag. He has a few tumbles, and he got his job title wrong. To be fair, he called him Mr. President. He called Mr. Sunak Mr. President. He gave him a promotion.
Yeah, he gave him a promotion.
Could be worse.
He is 80 years old. I think we forget this.
Well,
he's an old man.
And I think that's a key point. Is this even going to be the person that we're doing future business with? A lot of people may think he'll not even be able or capable to stand again, although he seems adamant he will do so. But you can't help but feel, though, Addie, that we went there with a big drum roll, expecting something dramatic, and it feels like a bit of a damp squib.
Well, let us know what you think of that. Tony in Suffolk says, is Rishi seeking popularity abroad when his popularity is fading here in the UK?
Fair point, because normally if things are going bad domestically, it's like, let's have a little jolly to America or Ukraine. David in Suffolk says the Prime Minister did not make this visit to the US to make a trade deal. Well, the 3 years to fixing a deal was another example of Johnson's over-promising. And, of course, Rishi has said we've had little things like the Ukraine war and the pandemic, which has prohibited him from doing it any road, but it looks like he's not going to get something over the line before the general election.
No, certainly not. And to be honest, it's not Joe Biden's priority, is it, to cut a trade deal with the UK? He's got his own domestic issues, and it's frankly not a priority. He's probably thinking, hedges bets, as you say, a holding position now, and he'll be thinking perhaps he might have more in common with Sir Keir Starmer. They're more centre-left, aren't they?
That's it. And
perhaps that's what's going on here.
A cynic might argue that Barack Obama threatened to put the UK at the back of the queue, and Joe Biden has done it.
Well, let us know what you think at home. gbnews@gbnews.com on any of the stories that we're talking about today, but we especially want to hear about your favourite things in the world, please. What are the things that put a smile on your face? We're talking about that lots today. gbnews@gbnews.com.
OK, let's bring you up to date now on all the rest of today's top stories. Boris Johnson has allegedly been given the findings of a Privileges Committee investigation into whether he misled Parliament over Partygate. The Times newspaper says the panel of MPs has sent the former Prime Minister a draft of their report. If the inquiry finds against him, he could face suspension from the House of Commons or even a by-election.
The High Street has recorded negative sales for the first time in more than 2 years due to rising inflation. That's according to business advisory firm BDO, which says the retail sales have fallen by 1.5% compared with last May. The company also says that online sales fell by 3.3%, the lowest results recorded outside of the pandemic.
And 5 regions of the country are now under amber alerts for heat. The east of England, the west and East Midlands, and the south east and the west are all expected to experience hot temperatures of up to 28 degrees. It comes after the UK Health Security Agency had earlier warned that people's health could be impacted this weekend. The weather alerts will last until Monday.
Now, dozens of you have got in touch on this knife attack in Annecy. Just to share a few, Andrew says this is absolutely terrifying. John says, when are we going to wake up from this nightmare? Now, of course, this is as dozens of tributes, including flowers and teddy bears, have been left overnight following that frenzied knife attack in Annecy in southeastern France.
A British child was among 6 adults and children who were stabbed yesterday in a lakeside park in the French Alps. The knifeman has been denied asylum in France just days before.
Well, GB News' Home and Security editor Mark White has the story.
Captured on phone video by a horrified onlooker, the moment this suspect walks from a children's play park just seconds after a frenzied stabbing attack. His victims, the young and the vulnerable. He is a Syrian refugee, granted asylum in Sweden. His motivation is still unknown. But this was the most horrifying of attacks. As he walked away from the carnage, sometimes breaking into a jog, he was followed by some brave members of the public who only had their backpacks for protection, as he still wielded the knife he used to cause so much harm. Police arrived within 4 minutes of the first call, shooting, then arresting the suspect. Former Liverpool footballer Anthony Letalic captured these images of the arrest. He'd been in the park running as the dramatic events unfolded.
I was trying to work out what happened, and all of a sudden a mother shouts, "Run, run! Someone's stabbing everyone by the side of the lake. He stabbed children. Run, run!" And I was a bit shocked. I carried on, and I came face to face with the guy, and there are police just a few metres behind him trying to catch him. Comes towards me, and I try to get out of the way and see that he's heading straight for grandmas and grandpas. And then he attacks a grandpa. He stabs him once, and the police are still trying to get hold of him. So I told the police, shoot him, he's stabbing everyone.
In total, 4 children and 2 adults were stabbed before the suspect was apprehended. Medics rushed the most seriously injured to waiting air ambulances. One of the victims was flown over the Swiss border to a major trauma centre in Geneva. Authorities say the suspect had lived in Sweden for the past decade and had married a Swedish woman. before apparently separating earlier this year and moving to France. In this beautiful alpine tourist resort, it was perhaps inevitable that some of the victims would be overseas tourists from countries including the UK and the Netherlands. The reason why they were targeted in this most horrific way is still to be established. Mark White, GB News.
Yeah, it's an absolutely chilling and horrific story. I think every parent watching that, the video is just one of the most harrowing things you could possibly see, because that could be you, could be your child. It looks like any everyday park, a place of innocence, defiled forever by this madman on the rampage. And we've got a few comments coming in here. Read a couple out to you now. Joel says, the recent attack just shows that we shouldn't be letting anyone that's not known or vetted into this country. It's an interesting point, you know, where do we go from here? Who do we know who is coming to our country? Joel is certainly concerned on that. And John in Swindon adds this, I fail to understand why those whose asylum is rejected are still allowed to roam around free. Again, it's another point. Does an asylum rejection mean an automatic deportation? Lots would like to think that's the case, and certainly where incidents like this happen post that event, Ellie, people, I think, have every right to say what kind of systems are in place, how safe are our children, and domestically, we saw a British child, one of the affected, one of the wounded, still fighting for their lives. How safe are we at home if we're not sure who's being allowed into our country? It's a horrendous case, but you can only hope that we can have some learnings and change future practice to keep our children and everybody safe.
Well, it's a very, very distressing and upsetting story, and we know it's upset so many of you at home.
Yeah.
The details are still coming out. There is an investigation taking place in Annecy. So far, the French authorities say there is no terrorist motivation, and they understand that the man is a Syrian man, aged 31, who had refugee status in Sweden. We're hearing reports today that he had applied for asylum in France and had it rejected just a few days ago. Whether that has anything to do with this attack, we're not yet clear, but there is an investigation taking place at the moment. But 4 children were injured in this knife attack, 2 adults, and one of those children was a 3-year-old British girl who we know is still in hospital.
We also
in a very
know
serious but stable condition.
Yeah, we also know that the guy, call him that to be charitable, was shot by police, although not fatally. He was incapacitated. He is in custody. No doubt he'll be cross-examined, and more details will emerge, hopefully to try and put some sense on what I think people are really struggling to grasp.
Yeah, and what is a senseless act, isn't it? Yeah. Well, do let us know what you make of that story. We know that it's a very distressing one, and we will bring you any updates that we have throughout the morning. Now, gbnews@gbnews.com. Now, do stay with us. We'll have all the latest top stories for you. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It's 6:26. You're watching.
No, it's 7:25.
7:25. See, I'm in the wrong time zone.
What are you reading?
I'm in the wrong time zone,
Yeah,
mate.
you are.
Anyway, welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And remember, you can get in touch on all of the stories that we're talking about this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. You're enjoying it so much. You're still in the 6 o'clock hour. It's good. You're soaking it all in.
I don't want it to end. I'm trying to go back an hour. Yeah.
Clearly. Now. Well, we made a mess of that, didn't we, between us? Now, are we witnessing the demise of the physical wallet? Well, according to the customer engagement platform Amari's, over half of us are instead opting to use our mobile phones to make payments. I know that I'm doing that all the time.
Yeah, it could be a generational thing. Let's find out. Let's speak to retail expert Lucy Davis, who is here to tell us more about what this means for the future of retail. Good morning to you, Lucy. So cash, we heard a couple of weeks ago, was back. 21% rise in ATM transactions. Now we're hearing no one is carrying cash anymore because we're all just tapping in and beeping away. What's the truth?
Well, Amasis has done some research around this, and we found, in fact, 50% of people in the UK don't carry an actual wallet or purse anymore. They just use their mobile phones, so that's all they have to carry. And the reasons are because since COVID, we've just become so much more demanding of shoppers. People used to go out for long walks and really couldn't go shopping, so they just took their phones with them. So we've become used to it, and as a result, we've just become so much more demanding. So, of course, it's imperative that retailers keep one step ahead of our demands as consumers.
I mean, it's the convenience of a phone, isn't it? I mean, I always have my wallet in my bag, but I'd only really get it out if I'd reached my limit on my contactless. I use my phone for everything else, so it's a convenience thing, but for me at least. But Lucy, do you find that people are spending more, perhaps, if you're using your phone for everything, because it is just so easy, it is just so convenient just to tap on your phone, and it's quite hard to keep track of what you're spending, really?
It's a bit of both. I think it's actually easier if you have a phone to keep track of what you're spending. And in fact, we're finding that retailers have really embraced offering customers their loyalty cards and vouchers and clubs, points and that kind of thing, you can keep them all inside your mobile wallet now rather than having to keep them in your purse. And you can keep endless ones. You don't run out of space, which you might do in your wallet. You might have 3 cards and think that's enough, I can't squeeze any more in. And so it's made things saving much easier in terms of getting those really important deals and discounts wherever you can. And in fact, the clever retailers out there have really learned to understand how their customers like to shop, what discounts they should send to each customer, really personalizing the offers to make sure that customers have the relevant discounts for their needs. So they have their mobile wallet, they have a discount card from that retailer in their mobile wallet, and they will be recognized when they go into that store. If it's geolocated, the store will know that you're in there. So you get to the queue, all you have to do is to swipe your phone, much easier than pulling out a physical card, or in the old days, we used to cut out coupons, didn't we? I guess some people might still do that. But yeah, so it's all much easier and definitely easier to save without trying too hard.
Well, I think you say back in the old days, but let's talk about the generational split on this. I mean, I've got club cards physically and I've got apps, and I can't get the blooming app to work. Sometimes it takes about four times to scan it in. If I'm fumbling around on a windswept car park for trying to download an app so I can park my car, a lot of people, particularly older people, would like to just put a few pound coins in and get straight into the pub and relax. So tell us about the generational split on this. This is something that younger people are embracing, but older people, a lot out there will be watching. Cash is still king for those people, right?
It might be for some. I don't think cash is going to go away yet. However, there are, I would say, about 67% of the younger generation have embraced the mobile wallet and are using more time. And I think that's because some of them have never known any different. However, half of that amount, so still about 35% of us over 45s, we're using the mobile wallet, and it's become really convenient. So I think it's just one of those things that once you try it, you don't go back. It's very, very easy and straightforward. So it's growing. It's continuing to grow. We've got even in the last few years since mobile wallets were advanced, were introduced. There are loads of different things that come in all the time that make it even much easier experience over the years. So I don't think cash will go away, but the mobile wallet is definitely growing.
Yes, definitely, Lucy. I mean, but some people do have a concern about security, don't they? Lots of people would say they don't trust having their payments stored on a phone. They worry about their data being accessible in that way. How much of that should be a concern, do you think?
Well, if you think about that in comparison to a wallet, a phone is a much safer way of keeping your data. So, you can't get into your phone without your own thumbprint or face, depending on which version of the phone you have. So even if you lose your phone, you can get that information back with, it's all safe and secure in the cloud. So you can go home and find your phone. I'm technophobe, and I did that recently and found my phone, which was amazing. So it's of course you still have to be careful, but I think a phone, I would say overall, is far safer than having a wallet where you can easily lose and probably not get back.
Now, Lucy, on a brighter note, on a different note, we've been running a poll this morning. It's in the Daily Mail. The small things that cheer us up in life, things like a random act of kindness, freshly cut grass, fresh sheets. I can hear some wonderful bird song behind you there. I can't help but notice. What are the small things in life that really cheer you up, Lucy?
Well, it's a really good question. We have green parakeets who visit our garden. I think they are quite common in the London or Surrey area, and it's seeing them outside my window in the mornings. I can't see one now, but there are lots of birds. So yeah, that's what cheers me up.
Lucy, I know exactly the parakeets you're talking about. I saw them the other day, and they are just wonderful. They really do bring a smile to your face. That's a very, very good answer.
Well, I've got to say, Lucy Davis, thanks for your input, but horses for courses, I get those parakeets. They really irritate me.
Oh.
Yeah, they sing outside in the morning, they wake me up, they wake up the kids, and they chew all my fruit up. So there we go. One man's passion is another man's poison.
Well, Lucy, I'm with you. Thank you very much, Lucy Davies. Really good to speak to you this morning.
Super.
Fascinating, isn't it? You'll definitely have an opinion on that. Is cash king, or are you using your phone now to do all of your payments, like me?
And I think a lot of people are slightly suspicious of this nudge towards a kind of electronic system. It's just a way of turning us into human barcodes. Governments want us to get away from cash. Banks do. It's less work for them, more control. But I think a lot of elder people, especially, they haven't got smartphones. They don't want to go down that route. We should have the choice, Ellie.
Well, let us know. No, and do you know what? That is so true. I saw my granny yesterday and I wanted to get my car washed and I was like, oh, I don't carry cash anymore. I was like, can I have £2, please, for the car wash? And she was fumbling around. She had all this cash and I was like, this is great. I love the feeling of cash, and you miss that, don't you, when you don't deal in cash. So there's definitely still things that you need cash for.
Cash is still king. If you've got a nice wad in your pocket, it's very different to having, you know...
And it feels like real money. I know that sounds silly,
take
but
care of it more.
on a card or a phone, it's so easy to spend it. But if you had it in your hand, maybe you'd think twice. Maybe I should be using cash. Maybe that would be better for my bank balance.
And it helps with budget. I mean, I like giving my kids cash. Right, you've got £5 there, make it last.
Yes. What, you give your kids pocket money physically?
No, I give them the occasional treat. I'm quite tight on that front. And I've told you this before.
He is. He's quite a tough dad, is our Martin.
I want my kids to learn how to budget and learn the value of money. And I think going beep, 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 that does the opposite.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. I wonder what that will mean for kids growing up in this sort of age.
There'll be debt, they'll be out of control.
It's our job, worry, isn't it?
It's our job to teach them to be tight.
That's what you're doing, yep. He's doing it for all of us. GBNews at gbnews.com. Do send in your views on any of the stories that we're talking about today. We'll share them throughout the programme, but do stay with us. We've got lots more to come, including the latest from today's newspapers. This is Breakfast on GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:39 and you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And we're just about to go through the newspapers of Nigel Nelson and Candice Holdsworth, who are brilliant. But Candice, we didn't ask you about your favourite thing earlier, so we have to ask you, what are the things that put a smile on your face in life?
Well, there are so many things, but I think the one at the moment is sitting on the sofa at the end of the day when all the children are in bed with the patio doors open and just having a cup of tea. I find that just so peaceful and resting. I love it.
OK. So I was thinking in the break, I was like, if I was Candice, what would my favourite thing be? And I was trying to guess what yours would be. And I thought yours would be your children's laughter.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That must be a good feeling.
Yes.
And a walk in nature, because I know you like the outdoors.
That's also, well, especially now with the buttercups out and all the meadows. So those definitely are my favourite things.
But the patio door thing is only a summer favourite.
I know, I know. I love the summer light. I love it, the golden light just streaming into the house.
And you're a better parent than I to at the end of that kind of a day, turn to a cup of tea and not something a tad more medicinal.
Yeah, something a bit stronger.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Candice, that's a lovely one. That's a lovely thing. Do keep your favourite things coming in. We're really enjoying reading them this morning, so do keep them coming in. GBViews at gbnews.com. And Candice, we'll have a look at the Daily Mail, shall we? And this is a big story that we touched upon in the first hour of this programme, that trust in the police is now hanging by a thread.
Yeah, so this is a story in the Mail. Andy Cook, he's the Chief Inspector of the Constabulary, it's a police watchdog. He said that basically, I mean, the police's reputation has really diminished in recent years. People feel that the police have been politicised by pursuing things like non-crime hate incidents, and they need to get back to traditional policing. And it's so interesting because I think there was a place in Cumbria that trialled just having one policeman on the beat, and they found that they'd halved antisocial incidents compared to the previous year. And this is what people are always saying, we just need bobbies on the beat. And so this has showed it's not just rhetoric, actually it works.
Yeah, Nigel, that's a sentiment that no doubt many people will echo. There's a sense how the police service has become more of a social service, call-outs for mental health, 37,000, that's the Metropolitan Police alone, 30,000 unsolved muggings, only 6% of burglaries getting mopped up. This is about what people experience and the visibility, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that obviously the first duty of the police is to catch criminals, and I think we'd all agree with that. I'm not sure I'd go along with the idea that police are spending too much time on the causes of crime. If you take things like the experiment they did in Glasgow for gang-related violence, that by understanding what made people join gangs, they were able to reduce the number who carried weapons by over 50%.
But they also were really tough on stop and search, and it was if you screw up, you're in jail. So they're also tough.
That's right. It was the original tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. But I think that when police are designing initiatives like that, they do need to actually look at what causes it.
Yeah, and it's got people going on the views here. Just a quick couple of views. Leon in Northampton says, when they purge experienced police staff and replace them with university replicants, we lost the grit, knowledge and experience judgments from the front line. A lot of people have been saying that sort of thing. Candice, they want a return to, if you like, We used to have veterans, we used to have people from the armed services. Now we're getting wet behind the ears graduates.
Well, this is the problem, and people say they sort of have their own biases and prejudices that come from having gone through the university system, whereas in the past you get people who are a bit more streetwise, a bit more down to earth. I think that they are trying, they're aware now of how they're perceived, and they are trying to change it, like, for instance, doing fewer mental health checks. My only concern with that, though, is does the NHS or healthcare providers have the capacity to take over that? You know, if someone's in mental distress, I mean, often the family does need help. And what's going to happen in that regard? Because we know that psychiatric services aren't, I mean, that there's just not enough to go around, and people can be on waiting lists for a long time.
I also wonder if the physical shape of coppers has changed, because I'm no spring chicken. But I'm pretty sure I could out-sprint most coppers that I see knocking around my area. Honestly,
well, there was that video the other day that you were talking about of coppers really struggling and failing, really, to apprehend...
That was an attempted arrest. I think it was at Vauxhall bus station. There were 4 coppers just manifestly failing to get the situation under control.
Yeah, and the comments on that were essentially what you're saying, that they were unfit. Like, there needs to be a better requirement in terms of fitness and ability.
Well, there must be. I mean, obviously, they're an active service, and therefore you need active people to go and do it. So, of course, they must stay fit, And
what do you think about cases such as Carrick and Cousins? Horrific cases such as those, how much do you think that feeds into the line that trust in police is now hanging by a thread?
I think that probably is the worst kind of blow to trust in police that has happened in recent years. So the police have got a long way to go to get back from that. I mean, I think there have been several things. There's been the institutional racism that we've found in police forces. We've had those 2 cases where women can't feel safe. What it needs is a root and branch reform of the whole thing, especially the Met.
Yeah, before we move on, because I think it's really important that we involve you in this conversation. We've had a load of comments on policing. I think this one by Diane really sums it up. It's pretty heartbreaking, actually. A friend had CCTV footage of a person breaking into her home. They said they questioned the perpetrator, but there was not enough evidence. This was told to her via just a phone call. She is nearly 60 years old and is now petrified in her own home. Sending love out there about that one, but I think that is so indicative of what people feel, that breakdown has gone of solving crimes that really matter. If your home is intruded, Ellie, that is a gross invasion of privacy, and they seem to be out there wasting time policing social media. Shall we move on? Yeah,
we've got loads of views on that, so do keep them coming in. Nigel, let's have a look at the Daily Telegraph. This is something a bit different, isn't it? This is about a married RAF veteran who was kicked out for being gay.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary story, because what happened is that this chap, he wasn't gay, but he was accused of being gay. And, of course, if you were gay in the armed forces before 2000, you would be thrown out, or you'd be thrown in jail. I mean, there were some pretty disgusting things happened. You would serve a prison sentence if they thought you were gay. There were these disgusting ceremonies where they ripped off your insignia and denied you medals. Anyway, this is Corporal Sean Walsh, and he's been trying to claim compensation for this because he had to leave after 10 years' service. He's been turned down because all this happened 50 years ago, and the argument is that it was lawful in those days, therefore he can't have compensation now for lost pension and lost pay. Why I find this extraordinary is there is an inquiry going on at the moment to talk about what reparations should be given to LGBT veterans who were kicked out of the armed forces purely for being gay. This was overturned by the European Court of Human Rights back in 2000. Now they can serve in the armed forces. They send contingents to pride marches now. So it's extraordinary that this man couldn't get any kind of redress because this was so far back.
I think it's interesting, and of course that's wrong. Hopefully this is an attitude from a bygone era. But Candice, just briefly, isn't this, though, an indication that now the response is, well, let's send officers on pride marches? Isn't that the same problem we have with the policing? It's become... Have we gone too far the other way? It's now the police force, the armed force, have become so politicised, such an activist area. Have we gone too far the other way?
I think, you know, true progress will be achieved when it's just not something you feel you have to comment at all. I mean, it's just the most normal thing in the world that someone's in a same-sex relationship, and you know, we don't even really need to market in any way. I'm just glad that in our generation we don't even think about such things. You know, you can be gay and have children. People, it's all just very conventional now, and I feel very fortunate that I live in a time where it is like that.
Yeah, he hits that. Look, we only got through a couple of stories there, but they were meaty ones. I think it's worth every now and then to really dwell on them and also involve the viewers because they're great topics. Nigel, Candice, you've been fantastic. See you again. Cheers.
You are watching Breakfast with Martin and Ellie, and do get in touch on any of those stories in the papers for us this morning, gbnews@gbnews.com, because as Martin said, we do love to hear from you.
We do. Moving on to our next one. Now, actress Nikki Sanderson is due to give evidence in the High Court in London against the publisher of The Mirror for alleged unlawful information gathering. The former Coronation Street star is suing the company for damages, claiming that journalists use methods like phone hacking and deception.
Boris Johnson has allegedly been given the findings of a Privileges Committee investigation into whether he misled Parliament over Partygate. The Times newspaper says the panel of MPs has sent the former Prime Minister a draft of their report. If the inquiry finds against him, he could face suspension from the House of Commons or even a by-election.
And 5 regions of the country are now under amber alert for heat. The east of England, the west and east Midlands, and the southeast and the west are all expected to experience hot temperatures of up to 28 degrees. The weather alerts will last until Monday.
Now, the actress Jodie Comer had to halt her show on Broadway as Canadian wildfire hazes took over New York earlier this week.
The Killing Eve star claims she was struggling to breathe just 3 minutes into her performance.
Well, if you are listening on the radio right now, we are seeing footage of this haze in New York City. It does look quite dramatic. Well, joining us now is showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci. Really difficult for Jodie Comer.
It's so hard. Like, I think most people on social media have seen the skies in New York looking incredibly orange and almost apocalyptic. And for Jodie, you know, there's been so many warnings for residents in New York and surrounding areas saying people not to go outside. But for Jodie Comer, she obviously thought the show must go on. But unfortunately, like, the show was 10 minutes late, and just when she was 3 minutes into her performance and she had to come off stage because she was struggling to breathe. It was quite worrying for audiences who were, you know, watching her. She was replaced by an understudy, and there hasn't been any updates since, but I think the air's been quite toxic in New York. You know, New Delhi has the worst air pollution, and New York this week has come second, so you can kind of imagine what she's been contending with.
It's worth bearing in mind that it's smog caused by Canadian forest fires, so it's blown over. It's natural causes. This isn't traffic pollution in New York.
Yeah.
It's a wildfire. It's blown over their way, and the smog is descending upon them.
Yeah, so it's at the moment we're not sure when Jodie's going to be making a return, but I think hopefully she should be on the mend.
Yes, fingers crossed. Bill Murray is in an age gap relationship.
We like talking about age gap relationships on this show because they're a bit fascinating. But Hollywood has a new odd couple, and it is Bill Murray and the singer Khalees. Bill Murray's 73, Khalees is 43. So tongues are wagging on what do they actually have in common. But they've both lost
Maybe they both love milkshakes.
Maybe they do. Yeah. Maybe that's what brought him to our yard.
Maybe.
An unusual sort of bonding method to both milk. He obviously fancies the milkshake, so he's in there.
But actually, on the serious note, both of them have lost partners. Khalees lost her husband to stomach cancer last year, and Bill Murray's ex-wife died in 2021. So apparently, they've been bonding over grief. But he's been spotted at a number of her shows in London, standing on the side.
And I wonder if this is a bad thing. I mean, you know, I think obviously as an older gentleman, not that old, I think, no, good luck to him.
Don't you think 30 years is quite a big age gap, though? I mean, what would you have in common with someone?
What do you really talk about?
Well, maybe, like a younger fella might have different interests
Yeah.
in someone like Kelly's, not milkshake related. And no, they can actually just like sit round. As you said, if they're bonding over grief, it's a different type.
Yeah,
connection.
that's the thing. And I think, you know, usually hardships do bring people together, and they're both in the limelight. But again, it's just, I don't think anyone in Hollywood didn't see it coming, like Bill Murray and Khalees. It's a very random pairing. But I think it's okay when it's an older male celebrity and a younger female celebrity. People kind of get their head round it a bit more. But if it's the other way round, that's when the tongue really gets
I'm not sure about that, because Madonna likes a Tory boy, and I think good luck to her as well.
But she gets a lot of flack, though, Martin, for dating all her younger boys, and where I think with men in Hollywood, it's kind of like, oh, he's got a young bird on his arm, it's okay.
Yeah, it's a bit more accepted, isn't it? Well, I've got 1 minute with you, so tell us about Rod Stewart.
Rod Stewart is making a comeback to the UK in terms of living. He's put his mansion on sale, his £70 million mansion in California. Apparently, he's kind of bored of the toxic culture in LA, and he's ready to be back on UK soil on a permanent basis. His wife, Penny Lancaster, she's been heavily involved in the UK because she's joined the police force. So I think it's a good time for them to be back home.
I just love that story, just all elements of it. £70 million mansion, coming back, Penny's joining the police.
And I've met Rod. He's actually the nicest celebrity interview I've ever done. And do you know what he loves? He loves football, he loves beer, he loves just Britain.
That sounds like
welcome
the UK,
home, brothers.
yeah.
Let's have you back. Lovely. Cheers, Steph.
Stephanie, you've got lovely stories there for us. Are you back with us again?
I'm back a bit later on.
Well, that's good news. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Brilliant to see you.
That's fabulous. OK, up next, former president in America, Donald Trump, says he's been indicted for the second time. More on that after the break. This is GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. For many of us, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. Low cloud out there, but that will retreat to the coast, leaving sunny spells for most. But changes are on their way. It's about to turn more humid. It's about to turn hotter. And there'll be some thundery showers by tomorrow. Low pressure is approaching from the southwest very slowly, but it does tend to veer the winds so that we're going to see more of a southerly component during the next few days. That will bring in the higher levels of humidity. And we've already seen the first signs of that overnight with some medium level cloud and a few light showers towards the far southwest. But for most, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. A lot of low cloud around. Very quickly, that low cloud retreats back to North Sea coast, where it remains in the afternoon, keeping things again on the cool side, mid-teens at best on that east coast. But inland with the sunshine, mid-20s, 26, 27 Celsius possible central southern England, albeit with some medium-level cloud. And we're going to see these showers reappear later in the day, with Cornwall mostly affected, but some of them pushing into Devon through the night as well, drifting into Pembrokeshire, probably Ireland as well. But for the rest of the UK, it's low cloud once again pushing in. A marked temperature contrast overnight. The low single figures for parts of Scotland, but 16 or 17 Celsius for the southwest. That's a sign of the increased humidity that is moving northeastwards across the country on Saturday. And with the change in wind direction and the increased humidity, we're going to see some particularly high temperatures, notable compared with what we've seen recently across central and southeastern parts. 30, 31 Celsius possible. Real significant change for the likes of East Anglia compared with recent weather, and mid-20s possible for western and southern Scotland as well. But with that increased temperature and humidity, the risk of some severe thunderstorms in places on Saturday across central areas, elsewhere on Sunday.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday the 9th of June. Coming up for you this morning.
Former US President Donald Trump has been charged with 7 counts, including willfully retaining national defense secrets. But posting on his Truth Social account, Mr. Trump had this to say.
I'm an innocent man, I'm an innocent person. They had the Mueller hoax, the Mueller report, and that came out. No collusion after 2.5 years. That was set up by Hillary Clinton and Democrats. But this is what they do. This is what they do so well.
Yeah, meanwhile, Rishi Sunak was busy signing the Atlantic Declaration with Joe Biden, hailing it the indispensable alliance as countries begin to close ranks on China. However, he did get his name wrong.
Well, Mr. President, I just demoted you. Mr. Prime Minister, it's great to have you back.
Oh. The knifeman who stabbed a group of children at a playground yesterday in Annecy, southeastern France, had been denied asylum just days before the attack. That's according to the French Interior Minister. 4 children, including one 3-year-old British girl, remain in hospital in a stable condition.
And as always, we'll bring you your latest weather update.
A subtle change in wind direction will bring dramatic changes to our weather. Increased heat, increased humidity, but the chance for some of thunderstorms. Find out more in the GB News forecast coming up soon.
Yes, it's hotting up. Happy Friday to you. I'm Martin Daubney.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. We're talking about our favourite things today because there's a fantastic table in the Daily Mail today on page 3 about our favourite things that bring joy to our life. And let me tell you, it is the simple things that keep us happy and make us smile. Number 1 is a random act of kindness. So perhaps someone opening the door for you or paying for your coffee, slipping into fresh sheets. That's a lovely feeling, isn't it? Watching a film in your PJs. A good hair day. Number 19, I understand that one as well.
Yeah, and the one that really gets me going, I do cartwheels. If I do that one there, I've discovered number 6, forgotten cash in your pocket or down the back of the sofa. If I find a fiver, it really brings me no end of cheer. And these days, that barely buys you a pint of beer, but nevertheless, that's free money. I love it.
It is a lovely thing, isn't it? But you're all getting in touch with your favourite things that make you smile. Leon says it's a child's laughter. It's the best sound. Barbara says it's the sound of a cat purring that makes her smile.
And a lot of people actually, Ellie, are saying it's you.
Oh.
They are,
really?
because on another point, Anne Diamond is set to return tomorrow, but it has to be said that there's been a huge outpouring of appreciation for you. You've been doing this job nobly all this time, and people are saying, Sue says, it's great news that Anne is setting to return. But Ellie, we love you and Stephen and you together, and we can only hope you continue to grace our screens on GB News. Ellie, you are wonderful.
Oh, that's very kind, Sue. Thank you. And David Mellor in the corner as well. Thank you, David.
Not often people say things I agree with, but that's what I do.
Oh, David, that's very kind.
And I know you're too modest to go through these. That's why I'm going to do another one here. Nicola in Norwich also echoes that. I'm so shocked to hear what Anne Diamond has been through these last 6 months, but pleased and delighted to learn of her recovery. But Ellie, you have been such a brilliant stand-in, and it's been lovely having with you on our screens and in our lives every weekend.
Oh, it's so sweet.
So, don't stop crying.
I don't, because I will get upset, so stop.
It's important you're here.
But no, thank you, Martin. It's very kind. It's been a privilege and a joy stepping in for Anne Diamond for the last 6 months. I've absolutely loved it. I've had a very, very close relationship with Stephen. Why am I getting so upset? But it's been amazing. So thank you, and thank you for your lovely messages as well. It's been lovely, and fantastic news that Anne Diamond is coming back. She's been very bravely battling breast cancer for the last 6 months, and she is still receiving treatment, isn't she? But she's very bravely returning to work tomorrow. So it'll be her and Stephen tomorrow, and I know that so many of you are so happy to see Anne Diamond back. So do keep your messages coming in on that, or your favourite things, or any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbnews@gbnews.com. And thank you as well for your lovely messages as well. That's really touched me. Thank you.
Yeah, good. OK, let's carry on now. You've got a little tear there.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, good. Let's move on quickly before we get a lump in your throat. Let's move.
Yeah, Donald Trump is expected to be charged with willful retention of national defence information while being accused of obstructing justice. He's campaigning to make a return to the White House in 2024.
And joining us now, you may have heard him chortling in the background there, is former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, the legend David Mellor. David, top of the morning. Trump's back with another bang.
Top of the morning is, am I having a good hair day?
You always do, David.
Yes, very
I'm
well
getting it cut at 10 o'clock, so have a last look, folks.
OK, not quite as good as
I've
Michael.
saved up.
Michael Heseltine was the man with the great hair and the Tories. But anyway, let's move on to Donald Trump, another man famed for his hair.
Yeah.
He's back in the dock, 7 charges, federal charges this time, David. That's a key difference. Why is that so important?
Well, it's very important because, of course, what happens locally, as indeed was the case with this New York indictment, where an ambitious district attorney wants to nail Trump, and he doesn't seem to worry too much about whether it's a true bill or not. But a federal indictment prepared by Jack Smith, a very, very experienced investigator, I think that's worrying for Trump. But unfortunately, as always with Trump, they've allowed him the ability to slip away. You see, having, his sort of various rooms of his house decorated with highly classified documents is not how it should be. And by the way, one thing you can say in Britain, if I as a minister was found with highly classified documents in an inappropriate place, that would be the end. One would be nailed. I mean, that's very, very serious. In America, though, it seems that, poor old Sleepy Joe has got them all over his garage, apparently, they found. And so where this is bad for Trump is, for an ex-president to face a federal indictment, that's bad. But where it's good for Trump, it's not like it's something where he can't say, look what Trump did, and look what Biden has done. Look at this, look at that. And so he can make it appear that he is a man who is being attacked by the political establishment. So he can redefine himself, although he's next president, as not in the political establishment.
What is so fascinating, sorry, Martin, is as you say, this doesn't actually stop him from running for president, despite the fact this is a federal indictment and a second indictment of Mr. Trump overall, but it actually plays into his popularity. It plays in with his supporters and it plays into his narrative, doesn't it? That it's him versus the establishment.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating.
Trump came out roaring. He says, I'm a popular president. This is election interference of the highest level. I'm innocent. I did nothing wrong. This is a hoax. So the actual documents...
I mean, the papers were either there or they weren't.
Well, so interesting. So the documents were there. It seems to be the new angle is 25 of them, we understand, are top secret documents. And so there could be an element of espionage, of compromising national security. Is that an angle, do you think, that will succeed in seeing him prosecuted, or will it just be, will it bounce off the armour and will he be back on the ticket as a Republican candidate?
He's definitely going to be prosecuted, and that's why this thing has lined up the way that it does. And I think that the way that Trump is, it won't be that good for him, but he will turn it to his advantage because he will claim that all this is his political enemies getting at him. But, I mean, why would he have top secret documents? I mean, we're talking about, if they really mean top secret, serious things relating to the defence and therefore the security of the United States. Why would he have those? And also, of course, there's, as always with Trump, there's what I think we were told we couldn't in Parliament say lies, but you could say terminological inexactitudes, OK? So Trump came up with a terminological inexactitude, which was that he'd handed everything over. And, of course, they then go in again and find lots of other stuff. So it's juicy. But, you know, one of the problems is the greatest democracy, as they like to see themselves in the world, is going to be mired in pathetic controversy of this kind.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about Rishi Sunak's trip to Washington this week, David Miller, because he was there on Wednesday and Thursday, wasn't he? And there was talk of the special relationship, as there always is, and Joe Biden spoke about there being no country closer to us than Britain. And, you know, you're from the era of Thatcher and Reagan, aren't you? And you spent a lot of time with both of those characters when there truly was a special relationship. Do you think that still rings true now?
No. And Biden, dear old Sleepy Joe, you know, a lot of BS about Ireland, and then suddenly we get a lot of BS about the special relationship, and I think he makes it up as he goes along. It was fascinating to be able to see at close quarters the relationship between Thatcher and Reagan, because it was a totally natural and spontaneous relationship. And what people never understood was how charming Reagan was and how much he and Thatcher got on. And when they fell out, I mean, I remember one incident where Reagan hadn't told her about when he was going to move in on some island in the West Indies, whose name eludes me, but I mean, you'll remember this. Yeah. And he knew she was cross with him, so he said, I thought when I arrived I'd have to throw my hat in first. I throw his hat in, bang, and it wouldn't have his head in it. He just had such charm. People never understood how much charm Reagan had. But when you actually look back, and the history of these times is written with a bit more perspective, what Reagan and Thatcher did together was extraordinary. Unfortunately, though, it meant that we moved from the Soviet Union to an altogether more chaotic Russia. I mean, a Russia that people don't, I think, understand quite how bad it is. In the bad old days, or good old days, you just get one old geriatric in the Kremlin replaced by another. But you never felt afraid, because these guys were quite disciplined. They knew what they were doing. Yeah, if Putin goes, who's going to take over from him? And is the person who takes over from him going to be an even bigger Looney Tune than Putin? We live in worrying times, which is why, you know, why I should be getting excited about, you know, what's happening with, you know, some of the things we have to talk about. Only one thing matters at the moment. Are we going to avoid a nuclear war.
Well, I'll tell you what, David Mellor, superb as always to reflect on your time. And I think a lot of people out there, people I speak to all the time, taxi drivers say they would like a return to a leader like Margaret Thatcher, who has that strength to go abroad, the Iron Lady, and come back, bring home the bacon, rather than a half-baked deal. And that's what people are saying to us this morning. Rishi Sunak hasn't really come back with much at all.
I mean, I was her youngest minister for 4 years. She was extremely difficult. I mean, she was even more trying than my mother, in a way, and treated me with even more contempt than my mother did. But I still feel proud to have been there, you know, albeit just someone to kick around, but I was there.
Oh,
David Mellor.
part of history. David Mellor, great to see you as always. Before we let you go, we're talking about favourite things this morning that put a smile on your face. So what's your favourite thing?
Well, I tell you, when because I was in government, being dragged around everywhere by the Thatchers of this world, I didn't really have much time to enjoy my kids when young.
Yeah.
So now I get a second go with and I must say, it sounds sentimental, but I adore my grandchildren. There's a particularly cheeky 5-year-old, and she's articulate enough to know what she's saying, but she doesn't have that sense of, I better not say that. So the other day she said, Grandpa, don't talk while I'm talking. Yeah. And it's that sort of thing that really I find enchanting.
Oh, that's endearing.
Talking truth to power and not being afraid of the fearless David Mellor should go a long way. David Mellor, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.
And you know what was so lovely about David Mellor was at the coronation, and you arrived with a little sticker on your hand from your granddaughter, and she placed it there, I think, the day before, and a lovely little faded sticker, very cute. Very
yes,
good granddad.
I think she is cute.
Oh, very nice.
I'm all for cuteness, you know.
You are. Well, do keep your views coming in on any of those stories, whether we're talking about Donald Trump or your favourite things in life. We do love to hear from you. gbnews@gbnews.com.
OK, and let's bring you up to date now with all the other top stories this morning. Firstly, actress Nikki Sanderson is due to give evidence in High Court in London against the publisher of The Mirror for alleged unlawful information gathering. The former Corrie star is suing the company for damages, claiming that journalists use methods like phone hacking and deception.
Boris Johnson has allegedly been given the findings of a Privileges Committee investigation into whether he misled Parliament over Partygate. The Times newspaper says the panel of MPs has sent the former Prime Minister a draft copy of their report. If the inquiry finds against him, he could face suspension from the House of Commons or even a by-election.
And 5 regions of the country are now under amber alerts for heat. The east of England, the west and East Midlands, and the south east and the west are all expected to experience hot temperatures of up to 28 degrees. And the weather alert will last until Monday. The remorseless father who abused baby Tony Hudgell so badly he had to have both legs amputated will stay behind bars after his parole was refused.
Yes, Tony Smith is serving a 10-year prison sentence for causing horrific fractures that led to him losing both of his legs.
We can now speak to Tony's adoptive mother, Paula Hudgell. Hello to you, Paula. So it's a tremendous honour to have you on the show. So how are things going? How are you holding up?
Thank you for having me. OK, we're doing all right. We were very pleased with the result from the parole board this week, that his release has been refused. Quite surprised because I don't think it happens very often, but it just shows the seriousness of, what he did to Tony. Just sadly that Jodie Simpson was released back in February before she even got to the parole board.
I mean, Paula, many people will be watching and listening to you this morning and thinking, well, 10 years was never long enough in the first place for what he did to your son.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why for the last 4 years we fought for Tony's Law, which was to increase sentences for child cruelty, which we succeeded with last year. So, we're proud of that. If they've been sentenced now, those sentences would be much higher. And obviously we're pushing now for a child cruelty register because there isn't one in place. But it just shows that Tony Smith is a danger to society, especially children. And, even if he is kept in for his full term, he'll be released in 2027, but he'll be released back into the community and have access to children unless we can bring this child cruelty register into force.
And, you know, for the benefit of our radio viewers who can't see the images, they just saw some wonderful pictures of Tony on his crutches, giving the thumbs up. You know, really moving images of him smiling. He's with Boris Johnson there. The resilience of children on a charity walk, the resilience of children, I think, is the positive aspect to take out of this. Because here's a young lad who looks like he's enjoying life. Tell us about the quality of life he has now, and has he got over things? Is the future looking bright for him?
I mean, Tony's always showed such great resilience and, you know, any obstacle he tries to overcome. He has a great life, yes, but obviously there's lots of daily challenges. And Tony is in need of a very serious operation, very lengthy, for his hip, because his hip's missing due to the fractures and infection, and also leg lengthening of the leg where all the growth plates were damaged. He needs surgery to his wrist. He needs surgery to his face as he goes along. You know, so it's endless what he needs going forward. You know, he's going to live with this for the rest of his life. Still multiple operations. He's already had about 28 operations since he was born. But yes, I mean, he just inspires us every day, because he never complains. He just gets on with it. Obviously, at the age of 8, he's become much more aware of the things that he can't do, the same as other children. Even simple things like yesterday, he saw a normal bike and he said, "I'm never going to be able to ride one of those, am I?" You know, and it breaks your heart to think that he has to suffer every day. And if they'd just taken him to hospital and not left him, you know, he may still have his legs today. But, you know, he's a happy child. We do our best always for him. We adore him, and he brightens our lives. He really does.
Oh, he is such a lovely little boy, and he's just such a hero and an inspiration. Those pictures are really, really moving. And at the parole hearing, the judge actually commended you and your husband for being such good parents to Tony. I mean, he is an absolute superstar, but so are you, and you are such wonderful parents to him, and he is very, very lucky to have the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, the whole court case was quite surreal, really. I mean, we had an NFA, which is a no further action. Had to really fight the CPS to get it to court. And luckily, the jury found them guilty within an hour, and the judge was brave enough to give the maximum sentence. At the time, the jury didn't even know whether Tony had survived. So for them to then find out he was living with us and had survived was... it was quite surreal. Everybody in the gallery, in the jury, and everybody applauded us, and the judge called us absolute stars. So, yeah, quite surreal after a very emotional 2 weeks of a trial.
Well, I'm really glad that you got that recognition as parents, because I think what you've done, you know, with adopting Tony is just so wonderful. How do you cope with what happened to your son? Do you ever find yourself racked with anger? How do you cope with what happened to him? Because you love him so very much. That's so evident to see.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely adore him, just like any of our other children. There is no difference at all. I do find it very, very difficult, especially when we go to another hospital appointment and they say, you know, he needs further surgery and things like that. And it really does eat at you, but you can't let it win, because, you know, you have to keep bright and happy for Tony, even though literally, you know, I sob when I know what he's still got to go through, and still what he's got to endure. But, you know, we have to keep positive for Tony. And yeah, that's what keeps us going, is him.
Paula Hudjo, a story that I'm actually finding quite...
Yeah, you are. You're very choked up, aren't you?
Sorry.
Yeah, it's hard when you're a parent. It makes you think. Paula, it is an absolute honour to have you on the programme, and you are such a wonderful mother, and you're in a wonderful family. And give our love to Tony as well, and to all of you. He's an absolute hero. He's a little superstar.
Yeah, cheers.
So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, it's very, very moving. It is. I mean, he is just... Can we get those pictures up again of lovely Tony? I mean, just what a hero. Look at him.
And I also think what's happened in France, Ellie.
Yeah.
You know, what's going on, it's like you just see these kids and it's just so hard to take sometimes.
Well, it's helpless children, isn't it, who are...
Those who deserve it least get such cruelty. But, you know, Paula is a genuine hero, a heroine. These are the sort of people that give you absolute hope in dark hours. Amazing, fantastic.
What a story. We know that that's really touched you at home as well as it has us in the studio. So do get your emails in and your comments on that story because it is a really inspirational one. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, change your pace now. Get my lump out my throat. Aidan McGee is here with all the sport. This is GB News. Please stick with us. Thank you.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. Do keep getting in touch with us this morning on gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, the finest dressed and the finest smelling show sports reporter is here, Aidan McGee. We're talking about all the sports news. We've got to start with West Ham. Historic Europa Cup victory, final minute goal, victory parade last night. You'd have to be a cruel, hard-hearted man not to say well done to the Hammers.
Without doubt. I mean, this is a traditional football club. This is a club who doesn't compete at top-level European football all that often, although next season will be a third consecutive season in Europe. This wasn't top-line European football. Nonetheless, there's no such thing as second-rate European trophies these days because the top clubs dominate all the trophies and therefore all around Europe, that is, not just domestically. And so when West Ham win one, I think they deserve all the credit they can possibly garner. Look at the parade last night. I mean, you know, absolutely extraordinary. We can see pictures now for the benefit of our radio listeners. We can see some of the tour around East London and Essex, or no, East London specifically, but they went back to Upton Park, around that area, toured around there, the area where the late David Gold grew up on Green Street, of course. He grew up at number 442, I remember him telling me, as in the formation, 442, and he grew up in abject poverty. If only he was alive now to see these celebrations, he would absolutely love it. But it's also a clue as well, Martin, about just what a big club West Ham United are. When I was in Manchester, people used to say to me 10 years ago when I was at the News of the World, what are you covering? Why do West Ham get so much coverage? And I said, well, it's not just because the journalists support West Ham, it's because if you're a red top tabloid, you have to cover West Ham well because there are commercial reasons, because you're strong in East London and in Essex. They moved into that stadium, everyone said, how are they going to fill it? How are they going to get 60,000 people in there? They've got 60,000 and they've got a waiting list. And they went into Kent and they went to areas you don't see top-line football and they've got fans there. And you're seeing there's an opportunity now, I think, for West Ham in the next few years to really establish themselves in the top 10, maybe even go further with a little bit more investment. But well done to them last night, and well played to Jared Bowen as well. Great finish.
Yeah, brilliant scenes in East London last night. We're just seeing pictures there of Declan Rice holding the trophy. What next for him then? Because he's off.
He is, yeah. So some people accuse David Sullivan, the chairman, of putting a dampener on everything yesterday. He gave an interview on radio yesterday afternoon or yesterday lunchtime saying that Declan Rice is off. I mean, we kind of knew that already. We kind of knew that he was going to he's going to have his pick of the clubs. He's that good. We're talking about a fee of around 120 million pounds. David Sullivan even said that he was offered 200 grand 18 months ago, 200 grand a week, and he's lost 10 million pounds in wages just by staying at West Ham. So nobody can criticise his commitment, but they've promised him he can leave. And look, he's been a first-teamer for West Ham for 5 years. I saw him play away to Chelsea in 2018. This is a player they got for nothing from Chelsea's academy. He didn't quite make it there for whatever reason. Some players are slightly late developers. They've had 5 years of good performance from him, good appearances, good service, and now he'll go off to a club and they'll get good money from him. And if they reinvest the money properly, there's no reason West Ham can't go to the next level.
And there's a lot of cads out there saying that Declan Rice, and indeed all of the West Ham team, have won more trophies than Harry Kane. Let's move on quickly. Man City, of course, historic treble looming. Can Inter Milan even stay in the way? Can they even compete with this blue machine? They seem unstoppable.
I always remember the Good Friday Agreement and Tony Blair saying it's not a day for sound bites, but the hand of history is on our shoulders. That's certainly what's happening for Manchester City this weekend. They're on the verge of a treble. They will never get a chance to do this. They'll never get an opportunity like this again. I mean, Inter Milan they're not mugs. They've won 11 of the last 12 domestic matches in their Serie A campaign. They beat their neighbours Inter Milan, or say AC Milan rather, over 2 legs in the Champions League final. Won both matches. They've got some experience in there. Henrik Mkhitaryan, he couldn't get the Man United side 7 years ago, but nonetheless, he's playing at a really high level towards the end of his career. Romelu Lukaku's there. They've got Martinez up front, who came on as a substitute in the World Cup final for the Manchester City striker Julian Alvarez to win the World Cup, of course. And they've got Edin Dzeko, who was a Premier League winner with Manchester City back in 2012. Now, these are players who most of them look as if they're past their best, but their coach, Simone Inzaghi, is getting something out of him. He's won 7 of his 7 finals that he's competed. So they're not going to be rolling over in this final. It's not going to be 3-4-0. I still think City will win, but don't write off Inter Milan. If you're Inter Milan, you're hearing everything that it's going to be, hearing everything around Europe. Everyone's saying it's going to be a read-through. It's going to motivate. It's going to motivate you, isn't it?
But if you saw in the FA Cup final, Man City have got a first team on their bench.
Yes, they have.
And they're bringing Foden on, a world-class player.
They have to win. They have to win this match because not only will they ever get a better opportunity, I think they will get other opportunities, but this is a great opportunity, but also for the prestige of the club. And they've underachieved in Europe, big time. They've been to 1 final, 1 semi-final in the Champions League. They've been playing Champions League football since back in 2011. I was at the first game when Carlos Tevez refused to come off the bench in Munich. And so it's taken this amount of time. In fact, it's 2011 since Guardiola won Champions League. It's a long, long time. So it feels right in terms of the timing, but they have to do it for their own prestige. I was in New York in 2010. And the CEO at the time, Gary Cook, was trying to market Manchester City. He couldn't do it. No one heard of them. Everyone, Man United were in town, didn't help. So if you go to these areas or go to these regions in the summer to play pre-season tournaments, but you've won the Champions League, you've got Champions League in your back pocket, it's much easier to market your club, and that's when you can make money. And instead of having to put money into the club to try and grease the wheels, which is what the Abu Dhabi Group have done since 2008. But the money's been in there now for 15 years. They've got to win this trophy. And they spent 1.4 billion euros on players, and that's not including wages.
And they still could face a probe on the finances behind that?
115 charges, I mean, look, they're tangling them. They're tying them up in litigation at the moment because they've got better lawyers than the governing body. But you know, they're not out of the woods there yet. And I think if they fell foul of any of those charges, it would besmirch some of their achievements. There's no question about that.
And let's have a word on the French Open, because it could be a significant day today, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, you were at Wimbledon last summer. You remember Carlos Alcaraz going to the fourth round and showing some real potential. He's since won the US Open back in September. He faces Novak Djokovic today in the semi-final at 1:45 this afternoon. Djokovic is going for his 23rd Grand Slam. That would put him out in front of even the great Rafa Nadal. He's already two ahead of Roger Federer. But Carlos Alcaraz goes into this with no inferiority complex whatsoever. He has won his previous meeting with Djokovic. He's world number one, which means he's consistent. He's won the US Open, as I said. That was last September. And I just wonder whether a victory today over Djokovic would mark a changing of the guard. We saw a changing of the guard to some degree in 2008, didn't we, when Nadal beat Federer in that memorable five-set final at Wimbledon back 15 years ago. Could we see that again today? Listen, I'm not saying Djokovic is going to be in any mood to kind of give any ground here. He's got a massive incentive to win that match, but it's a good old tear-up in Paris today, and I'm going to be watching it for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people may think that if Djokovic does this, don't forget he was kept out of tournaments because of lockdowns in Australia, that history will be his, and deservedly so.
It will, and when you consider as well that Rafa Nadal has already said that next year could be his last year on the tour, he's suffering with a few injuries and everything, as inevitably players with a high-octane game do suffer of it. You know, when the time comes, Father Time catches up with you. I mean, Alcaraz is 20 years old. But I think if Djokovic wins this tournament, listen, I think he's going to go on and extend his record as much as possible because he's fit. There's no question about that. But, you know, you wonder whether he reaches that 23, does the hunger ease off a little bit? We saw with Andy Murray when he won Wimbledon, the hunger just eased off a little bit, didn't it?
OK, well, don't ease your hunger off. You're back with us in the next hour. Aidan McGee, tip-top update. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, stay with us. We've got lots more to come, including a look through the papers. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It's 8:38. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And it's our favourite time of the morning. So going through the papers now with Candice Holdworth and Nigel Nelson. We've got some great stories in the papers today. We're going to try and stay away from the really depressing things that seem to be on the front pages, Candice. So something totally different from you in the Daily Mail. On page 29, it's about a miracle fat jab.
Yes, yeah. So I found this so interesting because everyone's talking about Wegovy. It's this new injectable that suppresses people's appetites and helps them lose weight. And it's sort of seen as this miracle drug, and it's going to make such a big difference. And Rishi Sunak was talking about using it for people who are off work, long-term sickness benefits, basically. But Mariam McGilvery, who's written this article, says there's another side to it. She said she was prescribed the drug when she became very overweight and was struggling to manage it. She said she actually became depressed because she likes eating, and eating actually brings her a lot of pleasure. Mm-hmm. And when she was denied that, she got very down. And I think that that's something that's very missing in this debate. I think it can become very puritanical, like you should eat this and you should be doing this. And we forget that actually food is a highly pleasurable activity that we enjoy.
And, you know, we're back to our simple pleasures in life.
Aren't we just? Yes.
We are.
And food absolutely has got to be one of them.
Yeah, and interestingly, I've had a brain fog. Jeremy Clarkson, he got on the Elon Musk fat jab, and he said precisely the same thing. He said, I was staring at a Sunday roast, which I know I wanted, but my body didn't want it, and he hated it because it stopped him tucking into what he loves.
Yeah, it's actually enjoying yourself. I mean, I don't think I'd have to get an awful lot fatter before I would consider a fat jab, I think, to actually stop me eating. But yes, it certainly should be on that list, that food should be a pleasure, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think the Sunday roast, actually, Nigel. Hang
is
on,
it there?
I'll find
Is it tucked away there somewhere?
It's number 10.
Well, it's too low down then.
Sitting in front of a Sunday roast is number 10 on that list of life's simple pleasures. Yeah. But, you know, for people who do have an addiction to food and they don't know when to stop.
That's different, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's something else, isn't it?
But that's an illness. And
that's when these sorts of things...
And that's when that could actually help. Just to lose weight is not a good enough reason to start jabbing yourself.
The only thing I worry about with these jabs, and I think it is really good for people, like we say, who have an actual addiction to food and they don't know when to stop, and it's binge eating and the rest. Yeah. But those jabs do have to stop. I mean, the Wegovys of this world, I think it's about a 2-year limit to being on them. You have to learn an awful lot about nutrition, and you have to break that cycle of addiction, because you just come off that jab and put it all back on again, wouldn't you?
That is such a good point. You can't just have a passive model of weight management. Actually, you need to make the lifestyle changes that led to you putting on weight and not being able to lose it. And so much of it can be about mental health, it can be depression, it can be anxiety, there can be so many things going on that you need to address rather than just taking medication.
That's the thing that I worry about with these weight loss jabs, because I feel like we're talking about it a lot at the moment, but it does need to come alongside nutrition and education, which we probably need a bit more of in schools, I would suggest.
Big time, I would say so.
It's almost like the answer isn't a jab, but just put less in your gob. Anyway, I'm just old-fashioned. Nigel, let's move on to another really fascinating story, and that is Britain needs more babies.
It does indeed, and the reason is to actually keep pensioners with their pensions. So what is happening? This is a study that is showing that in a couple of generations' time, the birth rate will be 40% down. Now, what this means is that at the moment you've got 3 people of working age looking after pensioners. 4 people of working age now. You will then have only 3 people looking after pensioners then. This is quite serious, as where you get the money from for an ageing population which is growing. And there's a kind of myth that people think that they pay for their own retirement through national insurance contributions when they're working. They don't. We're paying for the retirement of current pensioners, and our kids will pay for our retirement when we reach that stage. So with an ageing population, it really is important to do something about getting the birth rate up. Miriam Cates, the Tory MP, she's suggesting bringing back tax allowances for children, more free childcare so women can have babies and go back to work. And of course, I would add doing something about child benefit, which the government have been cutting back on, but would actually help if you can increase that.
Got to say, though, Candice, they may need to work on their PR, because jump between the sheets and procreate because you need to look after pensioners. It's hardly the greatest aphrodisiac,
yes,
as we said. But there is a serious point, and that is that there are going to be more older people to look after, and if we're not careful, then people say we need to import. Immigration, get more people in to take care. But actually, this is about more than that, because across the Western world, countries are fizzling out. We're seeing the same in Japan. It's below replacement. Italy is the same. There are drives in places like Hungary. So perhaps we do have to incentivise. It's a 3-word letter. It ends in X. Tax.
It could
tax
be.
breaks.
Maybe that will work. I mean, I think this is such a big question. I mean, from what I know, reading about this, the number of women having, say, 2 children, 3 children, that's stayed very stable. It's the number of women having no children and all that has so massively grown. And I think we need to understand why that is. Is it for financial reasons, childcare reasons, or is it that women's preferences have changed? And if they have changed, I mean, I would really not want to create any sort of coercive system where they're sort of pressured to have babies rather than doing what they want to do with their lives. And then maybe we need to look at the whole system as a whole, because, the fact is it's women who have to have these babies. They're the ones who have to take the career hit, the change to their health, their well-being. If there are things that we can do to help people have more children because they want to have more children, great. But if their genuine value preferences have changed, maybe we have to start thinking about the system as a whole a bit differently. So,
what's your sense, Candice? Because you've got very young children, haven't you? So, I mean, amongst your friends, have you got a sense that women's preferences are changing and many women are actually just choosing not to have children? Because this article suggests 30% of women in the next 50 years will choose not to be mums.
I think so. I think, nowadays people do prioritise career. I don't think every person is suited to having children, whereas in the past I don't think women were given much of a choice. If you didn't have a child, you were seen as a sad spinster. And nowadays, it's not like that.
Well, there's career choices that is choosing to have children later. And a lot of people in my age group, girlfriends that I've known in the past and colleagues, sort of left it a bit too late, as you say, because unfortunately the body clock is unkind to women, as it's not with men. We see like Robert De Niro, Al Pacino still kind of banging them out, as it were. But it's very expensive having kids. I mean, when I had my second kid, I really thought long and hard about it. This is going to cost a load of money, especially at the moment. I'm sure people out there will concur. It's not something that you take lightly, and all of these things mean that we're procrastinating.
Yeah, well, I've got 5 children and now loads and loads of grandchildren popping up. But yes, I mean, the expense of it comes into it. That for quite a long time, you're quite poor.
You've got 5 grandkids to look after you, so you're sweet.
You're all right, Nigel. Let's have a look at the Times, shall we, Nigel? Nigel, and your story here about raising the military enlistment age to 18.
Yes, this is a recommendation from the United Nations who look at these things. And what they're saying is that 16 is too young to join the armed forces, that we're the only country in Europe that actually does that. And they think it should be raised to 18. They worry about some of the abuse youngsters have been facing in Army, Navy, Air Force, about sexual assault cases that we've seen come up. The only problem I can foresee with this is that there's also, in parallel, a move to try and get the voting age down in England to 16.
Yeah.
So if you're an adult at 16, surely you'd be able to join the army at 16. It's one of those tricky ones about when you actually become an adult and are able to make your own choices. But obviously, if you can vote, as you can in Wales and Scotland, they are treated as adults.
Yeah, I wonder, Candice, if raising the age is the right thing. We've got a tiny military as it is, and I know from a great deal of friends of mine, I'm friends with a lot of veterans, and they left school often young without the qualifications that a lot of other people have, and they joined the military, the RAF, the Navy at a young age, and they say it was the making of them as a man, and they came from military families they wanted passionately.
Yes.
To fight for king, country, queen country and defend the realm at age 16. They're allowed to do that. To be limited by age, to me, seems to be prohibitive to their lifestyle choice.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I can think of one or two people specifically whose lives were absolutely turned around by joining the British Army at 16. I mean, some of them actually were living quite chaotic lives. It got them on the straight and narrow, and now they live incredibly decent lives as men. It was a transformative experience for them, and I don't think it should be taken away from them.
I agree. Here.
Well, let us know what you think at home. That's certainly going to get you talking. gbnews@gbnews.com. And I think we've got 1 minute, Candice, for your last story here in the Times. Something about worms living longer. Let's start this.
So, you know, all the anti-aging, longevity stuff that's going on at the moment. So they think they found the elixir of life. It's an amino acid called taurine. And they found that when they gave that to worms and mice, it increased their lifespan by something like 10 to 23%. Yeah. It hasn't been tested on humans yet. We don't know what it will do. But they think that they may have found the thing that can not only improve people's length of life, but possibly their quality of life as well. Which makes a lot of sense for older grandparents as well. People are having kids later. You know, you can become a grandparent now for the first time in your 60s and 70s. It can really help with picking grandchildren up, stuff like that. So I think this stuff is actually very useful.
There's not enough young people to look after old people as it is. Why don't we all have a jab and live forever, and then what do we do? Sit around and just...
And we should see how the worms get on before we start thinking of taking this.
Yeah, precisely.
Test it on those worms. OK, Candice, Nigel, thank you so much. That was really, really good. We just want to take you to some live pictures now of Annecy in eastern France, where tributes are being laid at that park there, where the knife attack was yesterday. We know that a 3-year-old British girl was one of the children that were attacked. She is still in hospital in a severe but stable situation. That's what we're being told by French authorities. We understand that 2 adults were also hurt alongside those 4 children, and the attacker, who was shot by police but not killed, has been arrested. He's being questioned. You know, he's a Syrian man, age 31. We know he had a refugee status in Sweden, and it was being reported today that he had applied to be a refugee in France, and that was rejected a few days ago. Whether that has anything to do with the scenes that we saw yesterday, that hasn't been confirmed. You know, but we can see tributes being laid there.
You know what's so heartbreaking about that? You know, aside from the fact it's a playground, is that place will be forever desecrated by this. I've had to take my children past playgrounds where people have been fatally stabbed, and to have a conversation with your child about, Daddy, what happened there? It just really hammers home. You know, the everyday beauty of life is suddenly just thrown off its axis, perhaps forever. But look, amazing scenes.
Yeah.
People are people and want to pay respects.
Yeah, as you say, really, really difficult to try and explain to children, especially if they want to go play in the park today, and try and explain what happened yesterday. But, of course, we'll bring you up to speed on any developments with that story today on GB News. Now, as cash-strapped local authorities continue to face funding concerns, many carers are simply unable to afford to take a break.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has this package.
Here in the UK, respite care is a statutory right. It's assessed and should be provided by local authorities. And yet, according to the State of Caring report, last year 41% of full-time carers were unable to take a single day off. Sue has been caring for her mum Linda since she was 14 years old. They've been attending Sandpiper's respite facility in Southport for the last decade. But as funding becomes increasingly tight, their one chance at a holiday has been put at risk.
You know, I haven't got any money. I'm reliant on benefit. I get less than £2 an hour for looking after Linda. But she's my mum, so I'd do it anyway, regardless.
Her full-time role as a carer means Sue can't take on another job. And without funding, her own well-being is taking the strain.
I don't really feel valued. I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel like I've got no self-worth, no nothing. It's like it's not recognised about what I'm doing when I'm saving the government an absolute fortune.
Run by respite care charity Revitalise, Sandpipers also provide breaks for their guests with disabilities. Without this, many of them would struggle.
I don't think we'd cope. There'd be no point to life for me. There'd be no point for Mum and Dad because it gives them a break, it's their lifeline. And without that, they'd struggle.
As this sector continues to face drastic cuts, the cost of living crisis is also having a major impact. Affordability is an ever-increasing issue, and the knock-on effect of that is that people with disabilities and their carers are not getting the breaks they so desperately need. In a recent survey of their guests, Revitalise found 56% would simply be unable to take a break without the support of funding. This is an issue they're trying to combat with their new campaign.
The Give Me a Break appeal aims to raise broad awareness of the absolute crisis that we are seeing in respite care. This is a funding crisis, and the reason for that is that there simply is not enough money in the system. And what this means is that more and more people cannot afford to take respite breaks. And respite breaks are critically important for the health and well-being of both the carer and the disabled person.
Without proper time off, caring relationships all over the UK are suffering. But as the cost of living crisis continues to spiral, the question remains, is there any money left to give them the breaks they need? Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Carers, the unsung heroes of Britain. More to come, including the latest updates on that US and UK trade deal. But first, the weather. This is GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. For many of us, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. Low cloud out there, but that will retreat to the coast, leaving sunny spells for most. But changes are on their way. It's about to turn more humid. It's about to turn hotter. And there'll be some thundery showers by tomorrow. Low pressure is approaching from the southwest very slowly, but it does tend to veer the winds so that we're going to see more of a southerly component during the next few days. That will bring in the higher levels of humidity. And we've already seen the first signs of that overnight with some medium level cloud and a few light showers towards the far southwest. But for most, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. A lot of low cloud around. Very quickly, that low cloud retreats back to North Sea coast where it remains in the afternoon, keeping things again on the cool side, mid-teens at best on that east coast. But inland with the sunshine, mid-20s, 26, 27 Celsius possible central southern England, albeit with some medium-level cloud. And we're going to see these showers reappear later in the day, with Cornwall mostly affected, but some of them pushing into Devon through the night as well, drifting into Pembrokeshire, probably Ireland as well. But for the rest of the UK, it's low cloud once again pushing in. A marked temperature contrast overnight. The low single figures for parts of Scotland, but 16 or 17 Celsius for the southwest. That's a sign of the increased humidity that is moving northeastwards across the country on Saturday. And with the changing wind direction and the increased humidity, we're going to see some particularly high temperatures, notable compared with what we've seen recently across central and southeastern parts. 30, 31 Celsius possible. A real significant change for the likes of East Anglia compared with recent weather, and mid-20s possible for western and southern Scotland as well. But with that increased temperature and humidity, the risk of some severe thunderstorms in places on Saturday across central areas, elsewhere on Sunday.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of June. Coming up this morning.
Former US President Donald Trump has been charged with 7 counts, including willfully retaining national defence secrets. But posting on his Truth Social account, Mr. Trump had this to say.
I'm an innocent man, I'm an innocent person. They had the Mueller hoax, the Mueller report, and that came out. No collusion after 2.5 years. That was set up by Hillary Clinton and Democrats. But this is what they do. This is what they do so well.
Well, not mincing his words there. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak was busy signing the so-called Atlantic Declaration with Joe Biden, hailing it as the indispensable alliance as countries begin to close ranks on China.
But it wasn't all serious business, as the US president gave Mr. Sunak the wrong title.
Well, Mr. President, I just demoted you. Mr. Prime Minister, it's great to have you back.
These live shots at a park where a knife man stabbed a group of children at this playground in southeastern France. It's been reported today he'd been denied asylum just days before the attack. That's according to the French Interior Minister. 4 children, including one 3-year-old British girl, remain in hospital in a stable condition.
And as always, we'll bring you that all-important latest weather update.
A subtle change in wind direction will bring dramatic changes to our weather. Increased heat, increased humidity, but the chance for some of thunderstorms. Find out more in the GB News forecast coming up soon.
Yeah, top of the morning is going to be a sizzling happy Friday. I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Now, Debbie from Nottingham has been in touch, and it's about you, Martin.
Oh.
She says she went to the hairdressers this week, and my hairdresser was showing everyone a picture of Martin and her when she met him and his dad in a pub in Nottingham. And apparently you put a smile on her face as you stopped and talked to her.
Great. In fact, I remember that. I was out with my dad, who's 85 now, and he goes every Saturday night in Nottingham. We had a great night out with the Dog and Partridge, a pub opposite the old Vicky Centre. And, yeah, we had a good chat. And as I recall, your fella bought us a pint. And we go to that pub, the last one before the bus stop home, so we're a little bit wobbly. But Debbie, fantastic to me. And I always love talking to people in pubs about politics. I can bore them to death. I just love talking to ordinary people because that is where you get the beating heart of the common sense about Britain. Not in focus groups, not from journalists, from ordinary people.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about GB Views as well, isn't it? I think it was one of the only channels where constantly asking for your views and your opinions and your voice on stories, and we love to share it. And it's fascinating, isn't it, just to get your insights. So thank you so much for always coming and saying hi in the pub or emailing us. It's really, really good to hear from you. We do love it. Lots of you getting in touch on our favourite story today, because we need something light, don't we? Light and breezy. There's lots of heavy news around today, and it's the story in the Mail about our favourite things. What are the things that make you smile? What are the things that bring light to your life? And lots of them are very, very simple things. I think we might have the graphic from the Daily Mail, but number one is actually a random act of kindness. 34% of people say it's their favourite thing. People being kind. It's a nice one, isn't it? But you've been getting in touch on what your favourite things are.
Yeah, so Barbara here, you know, I can totally agree with this. My daughter, Dolly, is just in love with our cat, Harry. Every morning after Mummy goes to school, we have half an hour with the cat on the sofa. And Barbara here says something that always puts a smile on my face is hearing a cat purring.
Yeah.
Completely agree. It's just a wonderful sound that soothes everyone.
It's love as well, isn't it? You can tell the cat loves you if they're purring. Sheila in Wakefield, good morning to you, says getting into a bed warmed by an electric blanket on a cold winter night is one of the best feelings. And it is, actually. Very, very cosy.
You probably won't need that tonight, Sheila. You might find yourself massively overheating. It's probably more like a case to get the aircon on, and it's always that time of year where, of course, you can't buy an air fan. As soon as we have a heat wave, you can't stay cool. Karen has another point, seeing beautiful nature when I'm out with my camera. What a great day to do that. Get out there in the open air, take pictures and just savour this heat wave.
Yep, definitely. Jan says, my first choice would be my 2 children ringing me every morning to chat with their news. The second would be hearing the seagulls at the seaside. I love the smell of the sea and the laughter of children along with the gulls. Oh, you could be a writer, Jan. I feel like I've been swept away to the seaside.
I think there's going to be a lot of that today, a little bit of poetry. And this is lovely as well. An overseas viewer, wonderful. Pauline in South Africa says, one of my favourite things is seeing the Indian Ocean every day whatever the weather. Getting a bit of get a bit of lifestyle envy here, Pauline. I was quite enjoying that for a moment, but South African Indian Ocean must be a great thing to wake up to.
Yeah, I think you might win, Pauline, actually. I wouldn't mind looking at the Indian Ocean every day, but do keep them coming in. What are your favourite things in the world? What are the simple pleasures that bring a smile to your face? Do keep them coming in. gbnews@gbnews.com. Now, Donald Trump is expected to be charged with willful retention of national defence information while being accused of obstructing justice. He's campaigning to make a return to the White House in 2024.
And also in the US, Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden have agreed on an economic alliance to counter challenges from China. The Atlantic Declaration aims to ensure Western allies retain control over key sectors of the world economy.
However, both countries have now abandoned the hope for a free trade deal.
And joining us now is our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Morning, Catherine, from a very sunny Parliament Square by the looks of it. Let's start with Donald Trump. As you'd expect, totally defiant. It's all a hoax. They're out to get me. But these charges are quite serious, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And isn't it incredible? We've had Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak meeting in the States, but both of them are troubled by their blonde, larger-than-life predecessor, aren't they, who always manages to hog the headlines. So Donald Trump coming out absolutely fighting. He broke this news that he's being indicted on 7 criminal charges, appearing in Miami on Tuesday. He's absolutely saying, I am an innocent man. These are dark days for the United States. He's also pointing out, of course, a bit of whataboutery, really. He's saying, but Joe Biden has got classified documents all over the place, even on his garage floor. So this is complete double standards. So, I mean, potentially very serious, because this is, of course, the first time in history that a former US president has had federal charges brought against him. If he's found guilty, he could go to jail for up to 10 years, but we're a long, long way off that at the moment.
And Catherine, we need to talk to you about Rishi Sunak's trip to Washington on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. I mean, they failed to secure a trade deal, didn't they, despite it being a pledge in the 2019 election. Instead, Rishi Sunak has walked away with the Atlantic Declaration, which he says is actually a better alternative in this insecure world. So tell us a bit more about this.
Well, yes, of course, he would say that, wouldn't he? But I think, really, the prospect of a free trade deal with the States, although, yes, it was absolutely promised by the Conservatives in 2019, has been not going to happen, certainly with Joe Biden in the White House. With Donald Trump, it might have been a different story. They are doing trade deals with individual states, but Rishi Sunak is absolutely touting this visit as a win. He's saying circumstances have changed. China, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, all of these things mean we need to act now and act together. So this Atlantic Declaration, working together more closely. He seems to have had a bit of a win on the AI, that the UK will be hosting a conference in the autumn. Joe Biden seems to indicate that he does think that the UK could have a very important part to play in this. Also negotiating in critical minerals, more defence cooperation, recognition of mutual standards, etc. So I think Number 10 will be very happy with how it's gone. But yes, of course, another manifesto pledge broken.
Got to be said, Catherine, when we look at the numbers, 92.1 million quid for this trade deal, that's dwarfed by Britain's donations in foreign aid, even to Nigeria. It's a very narrow tranche of business, the electric vehicle sector, solar panels. It does feel like, don't you think, we were promised a full-fat option, but Rishi Sunak's come back with a vegan option.
Yeah, well, we've been promised a lot of things by politicians over the years, haven't we? I mean, you know, they make promises and then over and again they break them. The most famous one, of course, being Nick Clegg and tuition fees. But, you know, it doesn't do much to instill confidence in politicians. But Rishi Sunak will argue that they have, succeeded, that what they've done is important, it is a step in the right direction, and he does come across on the world stage rather well. I think he's got more troubles, frankly, back at home.
Yes, Catherine, thank you very, very much. Enjoy the sunshine. It looks wonderful there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just think it's worth dwelling on. I wonder, we talk about the so-called special relationship. It feels to me like it's in special measures. Oh. It just feels like there's nothing really that they have in common. I wonder if part of the issue is that Biden's no particular fan of Great Britain. We saw he prefers Ireland, he prefers the European Union. Is he just waiting for a change of the guard?
Well, it could seem that way, couldn't it? And you can understand that as well in the sense that Sir Keir Starmer and him could probably be more politically aligned. I mean, they're central left. It would seem that perhaps that's what he's doing. This is a holding position until he thinks perhaps the next government comes in. But it is interesting, isn't it? I mean, his comments when he was in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and then juxtapose that with what we're hearing now about a special relationship, and there's no country closer to the States than Britain. It's difficult, isn't it? Let us know what you make of those comments. Do you think we still have a special relationship? Do you think we ever did? It was quite interesting talking to David Mellor earlier, wasn't it?
I think we certainly did. I mean, he was sort of harking over the sort of Reagan-Thatcher era, and I think a lot of people, both sides of the pond, would like a return to that close bond. But has the world just moved on? Are we forlornly trying to capture a moment in time that's passed on? Let us know your thoughts.
Yeah. Now, a teenager has died after being followed on his e-bike by police in Salford last night. The police had been pursuing the 15-year-old but were forced to halt due to bollards.
Yeah, the boy then proceeded down another road and collided with an ambulance, where the crew attended to him and brought him to hospital, where, unfortunately, he subsequently died.
Well, investigations are ongoing, but it appears to mirror the events in Ely that led to rioting by local youths. It comes as comments by the Chief Inspector of the Constabulary said trust in the police is hanging by a thread.
And let's speak to GBNews reporter Jack Carson. Good morning to you, Jack. So another day, another bad news day for our beleaguered constabularies. 7 of them are now in special measures. What's the future?
Yeah, so this incident here obviously is concerning. There's lots of questions, particularly from local people, around why they were following this 15-year-old boy. Of course, he has been named locally as 15-year-old Sal Cookson. If I just step, these are the bollards you can see behind me. That's the reason that the police could no longer pursue this individual. The tributes are starting to be laid here this morning. But yes, questions about why the police were following. We've not got any answers from the Greater Manchester Police on what this individual was under suspicion for and why they were deciding around 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon to start following this boy down Fitzwarren Street here in Salford. Now, the police have, Greater Manchester Police have referred themselves and this incident to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. They've sent out a statement saying that they will be attending this scene here to investigate after, of course, the collision happened so soon after they were following. But you're right, you mentioned this incident here is very similar, of course, to that in Cardiff, in Ely, just a few weeks ago. There has not been any of the same reaction as there was in Cardiff here, but people are coming to lay flowers, are coming to lay tributes, people saying rest in peace, my brother, and the sister of Sal coming out saying how this happened in such a blink of an eye when he was escaped the police pursuit that they had started and crashed into a parked ambulance. Of course, he was then rushed to hospital but did die later on. But yes, many questions here for Greater Manchester Police this morning.
Of course. Jack Carson, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Very distressing details coming out there. 15-year-old boy has died after being followed by his e-bike, on his e-bike by police in Salford last night. So Jack Carson will be there for us on GB News throughout the day, and of course he will bring us any updates as they come. Now, it's been great presenting this very show in the last 6 months, and we know that many of you have been emailing us every weekend asking where our lovely Anne Diamond is.
Well, last night, Anne spoke to Dan Wootton in an exclusive interview explaining why she has been absent for this long and started by telling him it was quite a journey.
My last appearance on GB News was on the 1st of January. And I knew then that I would be going away for a while. And I haven't been on a world cruise, which is what I know that social media has been saying. Oh, she's gone on one of her cruises, because I'm well known now for loving cruises. It hasn't been a world cruise. It's been a fight against breast cancer. That's what it's been. It's been a long journey. And 5 months later, I'm still not at the end of the journey, but I'm through it enough to come back to work.
So you were diagnosed with breast cancer, Anne, on the day that you found out you were being awarded this OBE. So I guess from a real high to probably one of the toughest moments of your life, I imagine.
That morning, I got an email from the Cabinet Office saying, congratulations, you are to be awarded OBE for my Cot Death campaign. And it was a wonderful moment. And that was like 9:30 in the morning. But I knew then, because I'd already seen my GP, that I had to go to a breast cancer screening thing later in the morning. And I thought I would just go for a mammogram and, a couple of tests, and I'd be free in an hour. And I spent the entire morning at my local hospital. They did everything: biopsies, x-rays, CT scans, couple of mammograms, everything. And in the end, by lunchtime, I was still there. And a lovely lady with a lanyard around her neck that said, Macmillan Cancer Care. And I knew then that it was serious.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what treatment you have had and how the cancer is now?
I had the full work, the full mastectomy.
Wow.
God, this is the first time I've talked about it. So it's quite difficult, but I've had the full works. The first operation I had was 9 hours long. I mean, I don't remember it. It was I was in and out like that, but 9 hours of removal and rebuild. And that took a lot of getting over. And then I had a lymphectomy where they take out lymph nodes later as well, just to make sure they can trace the travel, if the cancer has travelled at all, to the rest of the body. Luckily, I don't think they did. And I've had a load of radiotherapy, which I found very hard too. So it's been a journey, but I'm not pretending for a minute that I am extraordinary, because I am fully aware that, a quarter of women in this country are going through what I've just gone through. And I don't have any advice to give. I only have empathy.
I have had so many GB News viewers approach me in the street and say, what's happened to Anne? And I had some idea of what was going on, obviously wouldn't say anything and would just say, Anne's going to be back. And it is going to be so brilliant to have you. So from Saturday morning, you're back on Breakfast.
Yes, I am. I'm really pleased to be back. It's great. It's great to be back. I'll be back.
So Anne will be back with Stephen. She was just about to say there. She'll be back with Stephen from 6 o'clock tomorrow. And she's a very, very brave lady. And she's been through so much in the last 6 months. It'll be very, very good to see her back doing what she does best.
Yeah, and there's lots of people saying they're going to miss you tremendously as well, Ellie. But I don't want to get you too wobbly-lipped on the final furlong of the show. But a lot of people have been getting in touch as well today about the topic we had earlier about getting rid of cash. The death of the wallet, they called it. But a lot of people, GB Newsland, just don't agree with that.
No, they don't. Kevin says cash is king. Ron says cash is king, but mobiles are the new monarch. And I'm in my 80s.
That's almost poetry, Ron.
It is. You're very good.
So we did
very
there,
impressed.
king, monarch, I love it. George, I completely concur with you. If I come across a car park requiring apps, I walk away. Apart from being unable to see screen instructions to follow because of bright light or sunlight, there's a distinct possibility of making a mistake. Plus, they have your personal details. Car parks, Ellie, where people just want to put cash in a slot and walk away to the pub or go and relax and not worry about downloading apps and getting stuck and getting frustrated.
It is very frustrating, isn't it? Car parking is one of those things. There are still things that you just need cash for. Like yesterday, I had to get my car washed. Need a £1 coin, which I didn't have. I had to ask my granny for it. But Carol in Colchester says, I'm 72. I'm managing to keep up with modern apps, but yesterday I went to the supermarket armed with just my phone, and then I couldn't get a trolley because I don't have a £1 coin.
You get stuck.
What I'm saying.
Yeah. And Martin in Devon says, echoing the opinion of a lot of people out there, I'm a pensioner on a small fixed income and I cannot afford a fancy smartphone.
Yeah, but then Dave says, I'm 80 years old and I only use my phone for all of my payments and I love it. So the viewers have spoken. It's dividing you all.
Yeah, Derek, the final word to you. Lose cash, lose your freedom. What a great rallying call that is. Beautiful.
Yeah, well, keep those views coming in. Whether it's your favourite things or are you going cashless, do let us know. gbnews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, more to come, including our very own Aidan McGee with all of the sports news. That's after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
morning, welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie. Do keep getting in touch with us this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. We do love to hear from you, don't we?
We certainly do, and there's been loads and loads of stuff coming in today. Too many to read out, but please keep them coming in, because now it's time for our sport with Aidan McGee. Hello, Aidan.
Hi,
Smelling wonderful as ever. I always say that, but you just do smell really nice.
Thank you.
If you have smelly vision, you've been enjoying it too. Let's move on swiftly to the sport. West Ham. It's been a 40-year trophy drought, but they did it with panache. They did it with gusto, and they did it in the last minute. They
shows how bad we are at maths. We spent the break trying to work out how many years it was since 1980.
Well, age gets us all in the end.
43, wasn't it? Yeah, there were 70,000 people out on the streets of East London. Have we?
Yeah.
Oh, right, I should start reading those, shouldn't I? No, well, you know, sometimes it's what you think is all in your head, sometimes it's not. 70,000 people line the streets of East London. They went back to their roots in West Ham last night, and the bowling ground where they left in 2016, and had a procession through there as well. And as I say, that's a hell of a throng on there. And they celebrated in style as well, as they should. They took that competition seriously, Martin. You know, some clubs, you know, you look at Tottenham, they didn't take the FA Cup seriously. They got eliminated by Sheffield United, and it came back to haunt them later in the year, didn't they? And so that was a tough trip to Prague. They had a tough trip to Holland as well in the semi-final. They had lots of things to contend with off the pitch as well. And yeah, they are celebrating now. For the benefit of our radio listeners, there's David Moyes. He was doing some very good dad dancing in the last 48 hours or so. And it just shows as well what a big club West Ham are. People don't like to mention it too often, because they're a club that's probably shouts a bit too much, given the paucity of trophies they've won over the last 40-odd years, as we mentioned. But that is a very, very big club, and that's a club who the owners, when they moved the club in there into the London Stadium back in 2016, they said they were going to get the extra. They're going to fill the seats, and they have. They've got a waiting list now as well.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, we're seeing on the screen here, Aidan, Declan Rice holding the trophy. So he's been very proud to play for West Ham, but he's off, isn't he? Is he going to be joining his good friend Mason Mount?
Well, they're friends from the Chelsea Academy, actually, back in the day. But no, I don't think he's going to end up at Chelsea. I think Arsenal are going to prepare a bid for him in the next couple of days. And so everyone knows he's been going. This is simple as that. They've had 5 years of good performances from him. I saw him play as a centre-back at Chelsea in 2018 for West Ham, and I thought, this is a player. This really is. And then he moved into midfield, showed his quality, of course got involved with England as well, and that saw him kind of shift up a gear and gain the attention of some of the top clubs in the world. But I mean, David Sullivan, the chairman, he was accused of putting a damper on things yesterday, went on the radio and said, look, we expect to lose him. And we kind of knew that already, but he was offered 200 grand a year. Sorry, 200 grand a year, 200 grand a week. 18 months ago, David Sullivan made the point yesterday that by staying at West Ham, he's relinquished, or he's lost £10 million in earnings just by staying there. And in exchange, they've promised him he can go. And so I expect him to go to Arsenal, but there will be other bidders as well. I mean, Man City, Man United will be looking at the situation. Bayern Munich have been linked strongly as well in Germany, a hugely prestigious Bavarian club. It'd be great to see him go there and do possibly what Jude Bellingham's done, maybe a move to Real Madrid. But having said that, he's given great service. He's going to be one of West Ham's greatest ever players now after winning that trophy.
Yeah, and you're right, a proper grassroots, working-class club, proud fans. I was also on the screws, same time as you, covering that patch. And they're enjoying the moment. They're pointing out that Declan has won more trophies than Harry Kane.
I know. Well, it's true. You can't argue against that, can you? But, no, look, I was on the News of the World 12 years ago when I was in Manchester, and the people were telling me, why do you cover West Ham so much? There were commercial reasons for that, because we sold strong numbers in East London and Essex, but they were getting averages of they were filling out Upton Park, getting maybe 36,500. But people were up there in the northwest were saying, how are they going to fill that stadium? How are they going to get an extra 25,000 bodies in there?
Well, they've done it.
And they've done it. They really have. And it's starting to feel like home now. And I think that some of the criticism around the London Stadium, and then look, it will never replace Upton Park. It's not the same kind of venue. But now they've won a trophy there for the first time in so long. It'll probably start to feel like home a little bit more now. It'll always be an Olympic Stadium to me. Yeah. Because it's not just football stadiums where we sit so far away from the pitch.
On the subject of silverware, of course, Man City, after that historic treble, can anybody stop them?
I think it's unlikely, but Inter Milan, don't write them off completely. They finished the season winning 11 of their 12 Serie A games domestically. They won their Champions League semi-final, a very tough game against their massive rivals, the Inter-City rivals, AC Milan. They've got some decent players in there. Romelu Lukaku we know about. We know about Martinez, Lautaro Martinez, a World Cup winner with Argentina. Henrik Mkhitaryan, former Man United player, Dortmund player. Edin Dzeko, Premier League winner with Manchester City. They've got an excellent defence. They've got an excellent goalkeeper as well, Onana. And the manager, Simone Inzaghi, don't underestimate him either. He's won 7 finals. He's 47 years old. He's going to be a name. He's going to be around for quite some time. They've got ownership issues in Milan, so I don't think Inzaghi will be there forever and a day. But he's competed in 7 finals in his time at Lazio and at Inter. And as I say, this is a chance to really put his name on the map tomorrow. And they've got nothing to lose. Well, you could say, yeah, they could lose a Champions League final, but nobody's expecting to do it. And sometimes when you write off Italian clubs and Italian teams, we saw it in Euro 2020, didn't we, when they played England at Wembley? Everyone fancied England to win, and they went and pulled it off on penalties. And so don't write them off completely. It could be a really intriguing game. I don't think it's going to be the walkover that everyone's going to get expecting.
I'm of a vintage where I think if whatever club you support, you should be supporting the English club that's in European finals. But I wonder if Man United fans are going to be back in the Blues in this. You hope so, because I think it brings enrichment to our country, to our league. It puts our standing.
But United want to stand out as that standalone club who won the treble. They stopped Liverpool doing it way back in 1977, didn't they? And they could have stopped City doing it on Saturday. Missed their chance. They're relying on Inter and one of their former players, Romelu Lukaku, doing the business, and Mkhitaryan, of course, doing the business to stop them. But we'll see.
Can we have a word about the French Open?
Why not?
Today could be significant, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could. I mean, I just think, Ellie, you remember Carlos Alcaraz going to the 4th round last year. Yes, OK, he didn't get to the final or anything, but I do think that he showed a bit of quality last year. He won the US Open, of course. He's the world #1. He's beaten Novak Djokovic in their only previous meeting, and they face off this afternoon at 1:45 in Paris. And I just think if Carlos Alcaraz wins that, maybe it might mark a changing of the guard. Djokovic can't go on forever, but he has this huge incentive to win a 23rd Grand Slam, which will put him ahead. He's already ahead of Roger Federer on 22, and he just could go one ahead of Rafa Nadal and just maybe achieve tennis immortality, because we know that Rafa Nadal said next year is probably going to be his last one on the tour. It's taken a long time for someone like Alcaraz to come through. We've seen pretenders over the last 10, 12 years. We were talking about the end of that four-way dominance of Djokovic, Federer, Murray and Nadal probably 10 years ago. It hasn't happened because nobody's come through. Could Alcaraz be the man to do it by winning his second Grand Slam today? We'll see.
And again, in terms of that historic placing in the Hall of Greats, Djokovic, of course, was forced to sit out some of the tournaments due to lockdowns, due to his vaccine status.
Didn't he?
So I think he deserves this.
Yes,
he stood by his guns, he stood by his principles, he's stuck by the sport, and few would begrudge him this.
No, they wouldn't, and he's got a great
moment.
chance because Nadal's not there. Nobody could win the French. I mean, Federer did it once. I think Murray got to a couple of semi-finals. Djokovic has done it a couple of times when Nadal's been off his game. But with Nadal not there this year, it leaves it open for someone else to do it. And I think the winner is going to come from this semi-final. And I think there's no evidence that Djokovic's level is particularly dropping off. I mean, I could see him being very strong at Wimbledon this summer, but I wonder whether Alcaraz can don't know, maybe usher in a new era of dominance, as we've often said in tennis, but it's proved to be a false dawn in the past.
Superb. Aidan McGee?
Aidan, we're talking about favourite things today. I don't know
Yeah.
if you caught us talking about that today. It's in the Daily Mail, our favourite things that put a smile on our face. It's usually the simple things in life, it must be said. I think #1, if I can find this table in the Daily Mail, is a random act of kindness. 34% of people say that's their favourite thing. What's your favourite?
I try and do a good deed every day. And that's me doing something for someone else. I know that. I know it's probably, talking myself up a bit here, but I don't talk about it too often. But I try and do a good deed for someone, and if I do that, just carrying someone's bag down the stairs or something, that makes me feel good for the rest of the
So
day.
you are the random act of kindness.
Well, if you want to put it that way, yeah, maybe.
So you wouldn't go for an afternoon nap or the smell of a barbecue or sitting down in front of a Sunday roast? All of those are good feelings.
Sitting down in front of a Sunday roast.
Yeah, ready to
Can I eat it as well?
Or eating one.
No, I'm... what else? Well, I'm trying to think what I would... No, I don't... None of those really grabbed me, to be honest with you.
Good hair day,
I believe in...
number 19?
I have a lot of bad hair days, so good hair day's a good day for me.
Oh, there you go. We'll take that from you then.
You caught me
A
off
good hair
guard,
day.
I'll have to think about that a bit more.
Yeah, have a think.
I will.
Well, you're not coming back.
Oh, no.
Well, good hair day then. We'll give that to you.
Yeah, OK, thanks.
Aidan McGee, always a pleasure. And you're in 12 till 3, GB Saturday with me?
I am indeed. I'm winning all weekend. Yeah, I'm bringing a tent.
Look forward to it,
Nice
mate. See you then.
plug, Martin. Very good.
Well, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, because you're back tomorrow, aren't you? 12 till 3.
That's right, GB News Saturday. If you hadn't had enough of my mush already after today, please tune in then.
Yep, he's back. Do stay with us. Lots more to come, including Pontins, as you've never seen it before. This is Breakfast on GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 9:38. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. In fact,
No,
that's
you're not.
Martin.
You're
Ellie.
Martin.
I'm being superseded already.
I looked at it and I went, he's going to call himself Stephen, and there you are.
I've been promoted, just like Rishi was promoted by Biden.
No, but you're Martin. It's been great to have you, so anyway, I'm glad we've cleared that up. Now, retailers in Brian, I hope I've said that right, in Somerset, are challenging a decision by EDF Energy to house 900 workers from Hinkley Point C power station in a Pontins holiday park in the town.
Shopkeepers say closing the camp to the public is decimating their businesses to the point that many feel they may have to close down altogether.
Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody went to investigate.
The Great British Getaway. As war in Europe came to an end, holiday camps sprung up across the country. In Breen, in Somerset, the first ever Pontins, bringing holidaymakers to the region in their search for sun, sandcastles and kiss-me-quick hats. But all that's changed. Pontins has closed its gates to tourists for the next 3 years, housing construction workers in the chalets that once rang to the sound of hi-de-hi's.
So we're just recovering from COVID. We've seen the boom with the staycation. Lots of businesses in this area have invested heavily and are looking now to get that payback, and it just couldn't come at a worse time.
Pontins makes up 60% of the short break self-catering market in Breen. 5,000 holidaymakers a week spilling out of the gates and spending their cash in cafes, ice cream parlours and shops. Somerset Bakehouse say their business is struggling to survive.
Take-ins have been down about 30%. Seems to got a bit busier this week and last week because of the weather, but that's about it really, yeah.
Many businesses say the decision to take over the holiday camp will have a devastating impact on their future.
But EDF Energy say, yes, they are thinking of the future. Yes, they're taking over these rooms now. Yes, that's having a huge impact on the town. But they're investing millions of pounds to make sure that Pontins here in Bream is fit for purpose for many, many generations to come.
In a statement, they told GB News, "We have been working with the local community and businesses throughout the development of our plans. We have invested £2 million into upgrading the site for the future and now provide more than 80 full-time year-round jobs." The energy provider says it's offering support too to local businesses for marketing as well as more targeted help. But Alan House from Discover Breen says this is too little too late.
So we've applied for a certificate of lawfulness on the site because the change in the character and amenity in this village is clear for all to see. You've only got to come and have a look, and the amount of people that are walking out of those gates, it's next to nothing compared to what it was, and it's having a direct impact on local business.
Current plans will see Pontins closed to tourists for 3 years. After that time, it's business as usual. But businesses here are worried they may not be around in 3 years' time to welcome holidaymakers to the town once more. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Breen in Somerset is the way to pronounce it. Lots of you getting in touch this morning. We were talking about low birth rates earlier on in the newspaper review, and one of the reports in the papers today is saying that in 50 years' time, 30% of women will opt not to have children. Well, lots of you have got in touch about that. Joanne says it's because people don't want to bring children into this horrible, uncertain world that we're living in. Tony says, why would you want to bring a baby into this world? And Phil says, having had 3 children, all born in the 80s, if I look at the world now, would I have children? The answer is no.
Well, I think that's a sort of cynical view of things. I do understand it, though. You know, when I speak to my dad, you know, he's like saying, my best years were back in the day. And the world is an uncertain place. The world is an expensive place. And we see things like in the south of France today, a difficult place to bring children up. If the world that they're expected to fulfil, the role is to be carers for pensioners, not the most enticing thing. But then again, the happiest moments we've been talking about all morning is like hearing your child laugh, hugging your grandchild. So children are an amazing thing, but of course they're also a huge responsibility.
And they're very expensive as well,
That's
aren't
right.
they? Yeah, we have been talking about your favourite things this morning. It's this wonderful story in the Daily Mail about the things that make us smile in life. And it must be said, it is the simple things. It's things like a good hair day, an afternoon nap, the first sip of tea in the morning, slipping into fresh sheets. We've been asking you about your favourite thing and what makes you smile.
Yeah, and actually, an antidote to what was just said about children is coming straight through here, Ali. Andy in Kent says, nothing makes me more happy than when my wife and I get together with my 4 sons for the day. It's very difficult to do because of their work commitments, but it brings us a ray of sunshine. So there we go, the joy of children, not just the cost and the chores about it.
Yeah, that's nice. Ray says he likes human connectivity. He likes to hear a human voice on the phone when you have a problem with a company. That's something that brings him joy in life. I like to deal with people. I don't
Yeah,
like
same here, same here.
on an automated system. It's not great.
And Rita, again echoing, what makes me happy is my dogs and my grandson.
Oh, we're getting a lot of that, isn't it? It's family,
Yeah.
family and pets. It's the best stuff. Do keep it coming in to us here. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, as cash-strapped local authorities continue to face funding concerns, many carers are simply unable to afford to take a break.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has this package.
Here in the UK, respite care is a statutory right. It's assessed and should be provided by local authorities. And yet, according to the State of Caring report, last year 41% of full-time carers were unable to take a single day off. Sue has been caring for her mum, Linda, since she was 14 years old. They've been attending Sandpiper's respite facility in Southport for the last decade. But as funding becomes increasingly tight, their one chance at a holiday has been put at risk.
You know, I haven't got any money. I'm reliant on benefit. I get less than £2 an hour for looking after Linda. But she's my mum, so I'd do it anyway, regardless.
Her full-time role as a carer means Sue can't take on another job. And without funding, her own well-being is taking the strain.
I don't really feel valued. I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel like I've got no self-worth, no nothing. It's like it's not recognised about what I'm doing when I'm saving the government an absolute fortune.
Run by respite care charity Revitalise, Sandpipers also provide breaks for their guests with disabilities. Without this, many of them would struggle.
I don't think we'd cope. There'd be no point to life for me. There'd be no point for Mum and Dad because it gives them a break, it's their lifeline. And without that, they'd struggle.
As this sector continues to face drastic cuts, the cost of living crisis is also having a major impact. Affordability is an ever-increasing issue, and the knock-on effect of that is that people with disabilities and their carers are not getting the breaks they so desperately need.
In a recent survey of their guests, Revitalise found 56% would simply be unable to take a break without the support of funding. This is an issue they're trying to combat with their new campaign.
The Give Me a Break appeal aims to raise broad awareness of the absolute crisis that we are seeing in respite care. This is a funding crisis, and the reason for that is that there simply is not enough money in the system. And what this means is that more and more people cannot afford to take respite breaks. And respite breaks are critically important for the health and well-being of both the carer and the disabled person.
Without proper time off, caring relationships all over the UK are suffering. But as the cost of living crisis continues to spiral, the question remains, is there any money left to give them the breaks they need? Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Yeah, carers, undervalued, underpaid, taken for granted and essential for the fabric of the nation. Thank you to everybody out there who selflessly performs that role, not just for the love, certainly not for the money, but thanks for what you do. It's just an incredible thing to do.
Got to be one of the hardest jobs, isn't it? Hardest jobs in the world.
Hats off.
Now, Tom Holland has announced that he's taking the next year off from acting, following the strenuous production of his new crime thriller, The Crowded Room.
And it makes you wonder, after that previous report about, important jobs. Anyway, forgive me for being cynical, but the actor said that juggling two roles while playing a character in a severe mental health state pushed him past his breaking point.
Well, Stephanie Tecci is with us in the studio now. Good morning to you,
Good morning, Ellie and Martin.
So he's been pushed past his breaking point. What's happened?
And I know, some viewers, so rightly, as you said, Martin, there's, real jobs out there where people are being pushed to their limit. But, as an actor as well, I think sometimes we don't give them a break when they're playing these hard-hitting roles and not understanding how taxing it can be on the mind, as Tom Holland has said. He's saying that he had to play emotions that he's never experienced before. So I think sometimes with actors, it gets really blurred in terms of when you finish on set, some actors don't find it easy to shake off a character. So to be playing this kind of psychological thriller where he's playing a man who's been wrongly accused of a shocking crime seems to have taken its toll on him. We do have a trailer available to watch.
Got no sound.
No sound. Yeah, so when it comes to these kind of films, and he produced it as well, so I think it wasn't just acting, it was also him having to be in control of the production set. And Tom Holland's always been vocal in the past about, even him having to take time off social media because he found it quite toxic. So it's interesting to see that he's now coming out with this. But a year as an actor taking off, he'll be fine.
Well, it's wonderful, isn't it, if you earn the salary where you can, you're feeling a bit overwhelmed overwhelmed, you can just take a year off because you're demanding those massive salaries for the projects that you do accept.
And like most people can't take a year off because obviously they are thinking about financial, how they will survive in those kind of situations.
Yeah, I mean, forgive me for being cynical, but the world's smallest violins to Tom Holland. You know, he's an actor. He's paid stacks of money. He's not a carer. You know, he can swan off for a year, and his career won't suffer. Sorry for being bravely cynical.
You've got a point. You've got a point, and he's very young as well, so I'm sure a year off for him will be okay.
OK, moving on. So Prince Harry, he's had it up him in the High Court. Now it's Nikki Sanderson from Corrie.
Yes, so it's now Nikki's day in court where she will be taken to the witness stands, where she'll be talking about her experience. She is one of 4 representatives who are suing MGM, the Mirror News Group, for allegedly using illegal methods of achieving stories about her. She wasn't really up to date on the Leveson press inquiry at the time, so she said it wasn't until she spoke to her co-star Gary Lucy that she actually realised that she could actually make a court situation out of this story. It'll be quite interesting what she has to say. MGN have said they've apologised to her because they do admit they've used private investigators in the past to get stories, but they do feel like her claim is a little bit too late.
And it makes you wonder, actually, because Prince Harry's claim only came about because he bumped into a celebrity lawyer at Elton John's house. And now this has only come about because Gary Lucy has told her. I wonder, well, we'll see what the veracity of her claims are. Certainly phone hacking and the more nefarious methods are something that should be probed. But, you know, is this just a case of celebrities trying to cash in? Again, am I being cynical?
No, I don't think you are being cynical, because while I understand these stories and I understand it's quite hurtful the way that they've managed to get these stories out in the press, when you're taking such situations to the courts, you need evidence, and that's what's failing Prince Harry's case, and which potentially could fail Nikki Sanderson's case, because the Mirror have already paid millions of pounds in the past because they've, owned up to phone hacking. But when you're taking them back to court, you need to have that evidence. So while the celebrities are having their day with this story, I don't know how successful they will be, including Prince Harry.
Yeah, because that is what the legal argument is in court, isn't it? That's what we're hearing from the lawyers, saying, yes, we're aware that this is happening broadly, but can you prove it was us at that time? It is going to be quite difficult,
And
isn't it?
sometimes I think it's now what these celebrities are trying to do. I think they're trying to make the tabloid papers become the news story. So I think for some of them, most of them, it's not about financial gain, it's about making points.
And in 20 seconds, tell us about Bill Murray and the latest age gap relationship.
Hollywood has got weirder with this new couple. Is Bill Murray, Ghostbusters star, and Khalees, the musician. She's 43, he's 73, 30-year age gap, a very odd couple, but apparently they've been providing each other with support because they've both lost partners recently, so it seems like grief is turning into their love story.
Well, 72 years old, just go show you're never too old to fancy a milkshake.
Gosh, I don't think you are.
Stephanie, fabulous to see you as always. Thank you so much. Always really, really good to see you. OK, well, that's it from us. Martin, thank you very much for your company. You've been wonderful.
It's been a pleasure to be kind of schooled by you. You've been so helpful.
Oh, no, not at all. No, we've had a lovely time.
Yeah.
Stephen is back from Spain this morning. Him and Anne are back tomorrow. They're going to be right here bringing you breakfast from 6 a.m. And I just wanted to say a big thank you for your company over the past 6 months. There has been so many lovely messages and emails and so much kindness, and even sketches. I'm just going to share this sketch with you that we actually got from a viewer of me doing this job right here. Don't know what you make of that resemblance, but that was one of the highlights of the last 6 months. So thank you for being so warm and welcoming and kind to me over the last 6 months. But Stephen and Anne are back with you tomorrow, and stay tuned next because Esther and Phil are going to be here with the Friday morning. You've got the weather next as well, so lots to look forward to. Enjoy the sunshine, and thank you very much.
Hello, a very good morning to you. For many of us, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. Low cloud out there, but that will retreat to the coast, leaving sunny spells for most. But changes are on their way. It's about to turn more humid. It's about to turn hotter and there'll be some thundery showers by tomorrow. Low pressure is approaching from the southwest very slowly, but it does tend to veer the winds so that we're going to see more of a southerly component during the next few days. That will bring in the higher levels of humidity. And we've already seen the first signs of that overnight with some medium level cloud and a few light showers towards the far southwest. But for most, it's a similar start compared with recent mornings. A lot of low cloud around. Very quickly, that low cloud retreats back to North Sea coast.